One Everett Mercer was reborn as a prince in a medieval world, and his first royal decision was to hire the witch everyone had gathered to burn alive. Just 7 minutes earlier, he opened his eyes on an execution platform, wearing a prince's coat on his shoulders with a torch waiting for his royal permission. Borrowed memories hit him in broken pieces. Everett Mercer, the fourth Prince of Hearthmere. Today was execution day, and the town square below was packed to the brim with hungry townspeople, iron-capped guards, and a silver-robed envoy watching him. Like the verdict was already decided, Sloane Vale knelt at the stake with Nullstone. Cuffs locked around her wrists, her face pale from cold and utter exhaustion. Her skin was raw where the harsh stone rubbed against her. The executioner stood right beside her, oil on his sleeve and a torch in his hand, smiling as if killing her was the easiest task of his day. The crowd wanted one word from him: burn. Everett had no idea how to rule, let alone navigate this new body. But he understood the torch. If he gave that order, his second life would begin with murder. The executioner leaned closer, calling him Your Highness. Everett stepped forward before fear could lock him in place, demanding he hand it over. The man's smile twitched, claiming the sentence was already witnessed. Good, Everett replied. Let them witness this. You are fired. Drop the torch. It clattered down. For one silent breath, the square forgot how to stay angry. Then Hearthmere erupted into pure chaos. People cursed, children cried. Miner by the well shouted that witches killed innocent men in the tunnels. Guards reached for weapons because Everett had just turned a routine execution into a public brawl. Sloane Vale lifted her head, staring up at him with the exact look he deserved: pure suspicion, with zero hope in sight. Gideon Cross, his guard captain, muttered that her cuffs must stay on because Nullstone was keeping everyone safe. Sloane Vale's voice cut through, rough and sharp, warning that the square stood only because she allowed it. He should have been terrified, honestly, he was. But then he saw the bloody marks on her wrists and realized they had chained the only person who actually showed restraint. He ordered them to open one cuff. Gideon froze. He could barely believe his ears. The fired executioner lunged for the dropped torch, but Everett shoved him back, and a silver token snapped off the man's belt, rolling across the wooden planks, stopping right between Sloane's knees. Silas Baird, the steward, picked it up, completely losing his color, as he whispered that it was a witness mark. The executioner had given false testimony. The mood of the square shifted instantly. The very man who condemned her had climbed up dressed as a servant of justice, here to burn away his own lie. Realizing this, Gideon unlocked the right cuff. Blue heat instantly rose from Sloane's palm, thin and dangerous, every guard blade unsheathed. The crowd recoiled in terror while Sloane looked around, staring at her accuser, then squeezing her fist until the flame vanished. That was the first proof Hearthmere received. The very witch they wanted dead held more control over her magic than the town did over its fear. Everett turned so the crowd could hear, offering Sloane Vale an actual paid job. Emergency heat master, steady wages, food, protection, and above all, absolute freedom. Silas. A strangled gasp escaped her, matched by a louder roar from the crowd. Sloane stared at Everett. She asked if he was really hiring the witch he was ordered to burn. Everett confirmed it. He joked that his first royal talent was disappointing murderers. If this was just another chain, she told him to put her back on the stake. Everett challenged her to refuse him in public. If she said no, he still would not burn her. Before Sloane could answer, a silver-robed envoy shoved past the guards. He spoke with polished disgust, his voice echoing across the square. Under High Prior Malcolm Creed and the Silver Sanctum, mercy was heresy. The old Everett's memories were filled with fear. He would have submitted, and the entire town expected him to do so. But his eyes remained locked on Sloane and the shaking witness token. Saving her had already exposed one lie, but hiring her would do more. Suddenly, the winter surge alarm rang out before the envoy could speak. 3 heavy bells, a pause, then 3 more. Gideon went rigid. Even the arrogant envoy stopped his holy act. A guard yelled from the street. The beacon below the spire was burning red, way ahead of schedule. The winter surge was early. These people came to watch a witch burn, now. They had to wonder who would die next. The alarm did more than stop the execution. It made Sloane's fire highly valuable to the exact same people who demanded her blood. Everett ordered Gideon to unlock the second cuff. The guard hesitated, looked at the rising beacon smoke, then at Sloane's open hand. He saw the old fear clash with the practical soldier inside him. Gideon unlocked her other cuff, but kept his sword at the ready. If she burns anyone, he warned, the guards will strike. Everett countered. He declared that if anyone attacked her first, the guards would act. For once, the crowd heard the young prince defend the witch from them. Several workers backed away, while a few looked ready to throw stones. Then a bandaged miner stepped forward, speaking quietly to the crowd. He said she pulled his brother out, and Sloane heard him. Her fingers trembled once before she hid them away against her skirt. There was no naming what she truly felt, but the mob's certainty wavered. Silas wrapped the token in his handkerchief, holding it away carefully. He warned that keeping this token created heavy obligations. Good, Everett replied, joking that he worried his first day lacked paperwork. Silas gave him the exhausted look of a tired budget survivor. He then quietly tucked the token deep inside his heavy coat. The old advisor valued stability, but he respected records and rules. That made the man highly useful in the exact annoying way Everett needed. They quickly left the platform before the square tipped into violence. Protective guards formed a loose wall as Sloane walked beside him. Whispers rippled through the crowd, but the prince ignored them completely. Hiding her would look shameful, and the sanctum always weaponized shame. The holding yard smelled heavily of wet ash and horse sweat. Tension filled the air as Sloane rubbed the marks on her wrists. Gideon watched her hands, Silas watched the gate, and Everett watched everyone. He tries to look like a real prince, not some dead office worker inexpensive. Sleeves, he tells Sloane she can refuse him in public, but work means getting paid. If she stays, it is by choice. Her eyes lock onto his as she remembers pulling 3 miners out of a collapse. A foreman grabbed her, and her fire burned him when she tried to break free. A witness swore she attacked first. Everett's hand tightens around the royal token. Across the yard, the executioner visibly flinches, which definitely raises the prince's opinion of the man. Sloane tells him if this offer means she belongs to him, she goes back to the stake. Silence, the humor instantly fades. His past life had ended under exhaustingly cold office lights. My boss is calling exhaustion loyalty. He knows exactly what it feels like when powerful. People mean ownership when saying opportunity. Then walk, Everett says, promising to still block the torch. He quietly tells Sloane to run if she wants to, offering to hold them off for a few minutes. She gives him an incredibly sharp glare. Enough to deserve its own guard. Run where, she asks, since Dawnchild keep hands. Her to the silver sanctum when fear spikes. Hearthmere wanted her burned, and the roads will kill anyone. She lifts a hand, letting a tiny flame curl around her thumb with total control before blowing gently. She can run later, but right now he needs heat. That is Sloane's first genuine choice beside him, and it matters more than any oath. She stays for 2 very bad reasons. Every escape route is highly dangerous, and the prince had placed one honest option before her: true trust. Still far away, but choice is a start. A rider arrives before Everett can answer, his horse skidding on wet stones. The urgent order in his hand carries Damon Mercer's dark wax seal. Trust me, his brother is bad news. Everett's older brother Damon is polished, admired, and popular with people who like decorative princes and obedient towns. Silas breaks the seal, reads 3 quick lines, and instantly pales. Read it, Everett commands. Silas swallows hard as Prince Damon orders immediate evacuation to Dawnchild Keep. All Hearthmere stores are to be transferred under royal supervision. Any captured witch must be surrendered to Silver Sanctum custody. The envoy's face brightens so fast that Everett almost respects his absolute lack of shame. Gideon quietly mutters a curse. This is standing route. If winter surges early, evacuate the entire town before dusk. Hearthmere's wall will not hold. The order sounds responsible, which makes the royal trap even worse. Burn Sloane or surrender her. Empty Hearthmere or watch it break. Talk about an impossible choice. Either option proves he is a useless prince. He already died once in his past life after people used him up completely. He has no interest in repeating that miserable fate in a better coat. He asks Gideon one critical question: how many actual people make it to Dawnchild Keep when panic starts? His jaw tightens. Enough. That is a politician's number, Everett answers, demanding captain's estimate. Gideon hates that, but admits old people slow down the carts. Children get separated, and workers fight for places if blight beasts reach the river road first. Enough becomes far fewer. Mentioning the blight beasts changes the yard. Sloane's flame shrinks. Silas grips the paper, and even the envoy loses his easy smile. These are not mere monsters from some church sermon. They are coming Down from the Black Spare Range, and Hearthmere only survives by running before they ever arrive. Running might still be the right choice, but he absolutely hates that. A useful plan had to protect the living, not flatter his own pride, so he looked at Sloane's controlled flame, the token in Silas's coat, and Damon's perfectly timed order and the red beacon over Hearthmere Keep. Before sunset, he announced they would test the north gate. Gideon stared, with Sloane. He said paid guarded in public. Sloane's face hardened. Did he want them to watch her burn for him? The accusation stung, being close to the truth. He wanted them to watch her choose what her fire does, he said. He needed heat at the gate, but her choice mattered more. If it felt like a change, she could say no. The north bell kept tolling its warning while Sloane decided. Then she opened her palm. The small flame returned, steady this time. One test, she said, and she kept her own knife. Gideon choked. Silas forgot to breathe. He nodded, because his agreement cost less than his refusal would have cost. Her one test, her knife. His guards would keep the crowd off her. And the executioner, she asked. He looked toward the platform where two guards held the man as he tried to hide behind his own outrage. He would keep breathing until Silas decided where witnesses go when they lie. Silas made a small, wounded noise. That is a serious accusation. Good, he replied. Let it feel serious. The envoy stepped closer, scrolls shaking in his hand. High Prior Malcolm Creed will hear that he armed a witch during a surge warning. Make sure he hears he paid her too, he replied. Few people laughed, then looked guilty for enjoying it. He did not need the whole town to love Sloane by sunset. He needed them to see one lie, one free choice, and one use for her fire that did not end with a body on a stake. After he told Silas to stop looking personally robbed, Silas took a coin from his purse and placed it carefully in Sloane's palm. An emergency wage, he muttered, because even in a crisis, the man needed a label. Sloane studied the coin, then closed her hand around it. She did not thank him, which honestly was for the best. Gratitude is cheap. Taking the wage was better. The offer was real now. They returned to the edge of the square together. The crowd had changed shape while they were in the yard. Most people still looked scared, but they no longer looked certain. The fired executioner looked smaller without his torch. The envoy looked angrier without obedience. Gideon looked like a man preparing to defend an order he disliked because the alternative was worse. He climbed onto the bottom step of the platform. The execution is over, he announced. His voice carried because the square wanted instructions more than it wanted truth. Sloane Vale is under his protection as a paid emergency hire. Anyone who attacks her attacks his order. The crowd stirred. Someone spat near the platform. A bandaged miner near the well raised his hand slowly, asking if the surge comes early, can she keep the north gate warm? It was the first public question that treated Sloane as a possible answer instead of a curse. The question was practical, frightened, and useful. He could work with that. They would find out before sunset, he said. Gideon gathers the guard. Silas keeps the witness token and Damon's order. Sloane decides how much fire she gives. If the test fails, they move the children and injured first. If it works, Hearthmere gets a choice before anyone ships them away like damaged goods. The envoy shouted that his soul was in. He faced danger, almost joking that his soul had already survived corporate employment. But Sloane stood beside him with raw wrists under the town's harsh, judging gaze. The joke could wait. Instead, the prince turned toward the north gate. The red beacon burned above Hearthmere Keep as Sloane walked at his side, holding a coin in one hand, her fire primed in the other, as the crowd closely followed, fearing she might destroy them, yet desperate to see if she could save them. So the prince kept her close, pointed directly at the gate, and ordered their guard leader, Gideon, to gather every guard who still cared more about Hearthmere than doctrine. Sloane was alive and the execution was over. Now he had to prove that hiring the witch could actually save the very town that had begged him to burn her alive. Saving Sloane was far easier than convincing people not to scream when she breathed smoke. They reached the north gate with half of Hearthmere behind them. The crowd stayed close enough to watch her, but far enough to run away. The yard should have been buzzing with work. Instead, workers stood frozen around buckets, shuttered carts, and a gate winch crusted white with frost. The winter surge beacon still rang over the keep, and every harsh note made Damon's evacuation order sound reasonable. Evacuate. Transfer the stores, hand over the witch. It was clean, responsible, and convenient for everyone except the chained, the hungry, the old, the injured, or Sloane Vale. He pointed at the gatehouse. We start there, he announced. Nobody moved. His first Lesson in frontier leadership came fast. Royal orders could stop executions, but could not make terrified people trust magic fire. A bearded, angry mill worker crossed his arms. He warned, she touches that gate, I leave. Another worker stepped back. My own brother works inside the mill. I am definitely not putting him near witch flame. Sloane's face did not change, which told him more than if she had shouted. She held the coin Silas had given her, thumb pressing hard over the stamped edge. Paid work, no master. He had said it in public. Now the town was making the words prove themselves. Gideon moved in front of her before he could speak. Your Highness, the gate is crowded. One spark hits dry straw and we have panicked before we even have a test. One blade points at her back, Sloane said. And your panic gets worse. Talk about a tough crowd. Still, he looked at the workers. No one is forced to stand near her, he announced. Anyone who works gets paid. Anyone who leaves loses no ration today. Silas made a sharp, wounded sound right behind him. He had known him for one morning, and he was already treating survival as more important than bookkeeping, a difficult start to their working relationship. The workers did not move. A few muttered. Others watched Sloane as though standing near her might spread something. The gate test was failing before it started. Not because the plan was impossible, but because fear had years of practice, and he only had only one morning. Then metal shrieked inside the mill, a high crack tore through the yard, followed by white steam bursting from the low stone building beside the gate. The crowd turned together. Someone shouted that the mill boiler had split. Someone else yelled that men were trapped inside. Every argument about Sloane stopped. A door slammed open. Two workers stumbled out coughing, but a third did not make it. Suddenly, a scream cut short. Then the sound cut off under another metal groan. Gideon cursed and grabbed. Two guards get axes now. The workers surged toward the door then stop as scalding steam rolls out, hot enough to blister. The trapped man screams. Again, his voice growing thin. The people who refused Sloane's help 10 breaths ago suddenly look anywhere but at her. The prince hates seeing this grim opportunity in this disaster. Sloane looks at the mill, then at him. Do they want proof or a corpse? Gideon snaps, banning fire in the boiler. She retorts to send his own men. Then he stays silent. One guard tries to enter and stumbles back with a smoking sleeve. Inside, the trapped worker screams the prince's title. He has two choices: hide Sloane to keep the town calm, or let them see exactly what they almost burned. The prince steps between Gideon and Sloane, asking if she can reach him without lighting the place. Not if anyone grabs or shoots her, she says. And only if the captain stops staring at her hands like they are already guilty. Gideon's jaw tightens. Lower your blades, the prince orders. Every guard hates that order. Good, it means they understand the cost. Sloane does not move. The prince lowers his voice, telling her she can leave. He means it. Her eyes stay locked on the broken mill door. Her expression tightens when the trapped worker screams again. He knows only what she told him about the mine and the foreman, so he does not pretend to understand her pain. He only sees her make a choice. One worker, one honest use, she says, then walks straight into the steam. The crowd draws back and leans forward all at once. He follows 2 steps behind her, because courage is easier when someone else leads, and because letting her go alone would make the rescue look like another ruthless prince ordering a witch into danger. Inside, the heat steals. His first breath, wet stone, spilled grain, and shattered iron fill the space. The trapped worker lies behind a fallen beam, his leg pinned near the ruptured boiler. Steam blasts from a thumb-wide split. Sloane raises a hand. Every guard outside holds their breath. He hears it through the door, and she hears it too. Her fingers tremble once, then steady. Narrow blue flame leaves her palm without flaring or spreading. She presses it against the fissure until the metal glows, and the roaring steam drops to a quiet hiss. Nobody moves. The magic they all feared just became the only reason this trapped man is still breathing. Now Sloane commands. The prince grabs the worker while Gideon rushes in, wrapping his arms around the heavy beam and shoving with an angry grunt. It shifts just enough to drag his leg free. The man screams and Sloane's flame flickers toward him. She snuffs it instantly. Her control matters more than sealing the boiler. Sloane sees the worker's agony, feels her fire shift, and kills it before anyone can accuse her. They haul the injured man into the muddy yard, coughing, alive but bleeding. The crowd stares at Sloane. Through the thick steam, they expected a monster but see a woman with raw wrists standing in a ruined doorway, smoke rising from her palm, looking completely exhausted instead of triumphant. For 3 seconds the yard cheers, then the Cheers break because Hearthmere remembers its hatred of witches and has no idea how to show gratitude. Confused, people slowly lower their hands. Someone whispers a desperate prayer. Another mutters that the worker might still sicken. Fear lost one argument. Another instantly started. The worker painfully pushed up on one elbow. He stared from Sloane to the silent, watching crowd in utter disbelief. Thanking her clearly cost him every single bit of remaining strength, but he said it anyway. She saved me, he declared. When nobody answered, he shouted it. Sloane Vale saved me, a true thank you at last. Silas shoved aggressively through the guards, cracking his notebook open. He ordered the trembling worker to repeat those exact words immediately. Preferably before you pass out right here, Silas panted. The prince almost laughed, loving how Silas treated raw truth with the strict care of an unpaid ledger. The worker repeated it. Silas quickly scribbled. Did you see her save him from the boiler? One worker looked at Sloane, then at Everett before slowly nodding. That single nod spoke far louder than any grand, sweeping speech the prince could have delivered. Hearthmere watched Sloane save a life. Now fear met reality. The crowd stared at the mud while Gideon studied Sloane. His suspicion remained, but the threat was shifting. Before she was a danger, now she was a savior. It was far from friendship, but this was progress. Gideon pointed to her hand. Sloane curled her fingers. A raw blister lined her palm from squeezing that scorching metal seal with all her strength. Everett caught his tone before his care sounded like another command. Everett ordered Silas to bring a cloth and pay her. Sloane eyed him with sharp, cold suspicion. The prince slowly realized her trust was never warm, representing just one less reason to flee. Silas handed over a cloth. Sloane quietly took it. The heroic rescue did not instantly make them kind, but it divided them into warring factions. One woman argued that Sloane should fix the freezing town gatehouse next. Others warned that dealing with a witch always carried a heavy price later. But she kept his brother alive, another worker yelled back, pointing at the smoking mill. It was not love, but a practical question. What if this condemned witch was useful? What if burning her at the stake cost them their hope? Everett climbed onto a wooden crate. The prince spoke before the argument became a riot. The worker survived, the mill stands, and Sloane did all of this entirely by her own choice. With those words, the spotless sanctum envoy pushed through the mud. He pointed a clean finger, accusing the prince of harboring and unleashing dangerous witchcraft. He claimed it happened during a surge warning, and Everett proudly agreed. Yes, Everett snapped, saving the man your useless prayers were simply watching die. Yard went absolutely silent as the envoy raised a wax-sealed royal decree before them. Prior Malcolm Creed demands her execution. Aiding her means committing treason against the sanctum. Surrender the witch immediately. With the second bell chiming soon, Everett had less than an hour. That notice was a cleaner execution order, official, cold, and built for calculated cruelty. Cruelty with margins. The rescued worker struggled to sit up, saying Sloane saved him. She saved me, he cried. The envoy ignored him. Contamination often began with gratitude. Sloane froze. The prince felt a cold, sharp anger rise, but kept his voice completely calm. Raising it would only make dangerous. Permanent choices feel too reasonable. He snatched the notice from the envoy, calling out to Silas to write it down. Note that this notice arrived after the rescue, but before the gate test finished. Silas's pen began scratching immediately. The envoy stepped closer, his eyes cold. You cannot file your way out of heresy, the envoy warned. No, the prince replied. But he could make everyone remember the exact order. Sloane looked at him, fresh blood already seeping through the bandage on her hand. She had saved a man who might still fear her tomorrow, earning only a single thank you. Now a death order was waiting. Pushing her to use more fire would feel like exploitation. So he did not ask. The gate test waits, he announced. Sloane is resting. Until she decides otherwise. Gideon, guard her. Silas, secure the witness statements. He told everyone to look at that breathing man and decide. Do they want holy doctrine, or a wall protecting their children from Blackspear? The workers did not cheer this time. Good, cheers were always cheap anyway. Several turned toward the gatehouse, instead of heading back to Dawnshield Keep. That was better. The envoy raised the notice, like a shield against the smoke. Second bell, your highness, the envoy mocked. The prince held up the worker's statement. Talk about a power move. The prince mockingly noted they both brought paper. Then they looked guilty. More importantly, the envoy looked smaller for a second. Not defeated, just smaller. Sloane stepped down and stood right beside him, not behind. Her burned hand was wrapped, her face pale and her voice quiet. "You are making enemies very fast," she whispered. Apparently, he was efficient. "That was not praise," she warned. "I know," he replied, watching her face. For once, her mouth almost twitched into a smile. Then the alarm rang. The half-smile vanished, the worker survived, and the first statement was official. Sloane had one genuine "thank you," but a fresh death order followed it. He proved her fire could save lives, forcing her enemies to move faster. As the second bell began to toll, the prince understood the real trap. Saving Sloane was just the beginning. Defending her would require undeniable proof. Proof that could survive the powerful people desperate to bury it forever. By morning, half the town saw him as a savior, the rest as a fool. They thought he had adopted a beautiful disaster. Sloane stood at the north gate. With a bandaged hand and a single coin, she clearly wanted to escape. He was her last resort, and of course, that notice didn't magically burn overnight. A bit rude, the prince thought. Silas kept the document safe. Right alongside the rescued workers' statement and evacuation orders. 3 pressures: surrender Sloane, abandon Hearthmere, or find undeniable proof. So he made another reckless public decision, gathering the workers together. No forced labor, he announced, paid wall work and food at midday. Anyone signing on must know the risks before they touch a single stone. Silas closed his eyes in frustration, while the workers just stared in silence. They stared with the suspicion of people who had heard rich men promise fairness and received bruises instead. He did not blame them. In his past life, emergencies meant free overtime with better lighting and worse lies. He refused to rebuild that system in a nicer coat. But watch this, Gideon folded his arms, stating they had no time to negotiate wages while the range spits monsters. He countered that they also had no time for workers to flee, fearing they would be turned into royal meat shields. The guards disliked that answer, but the workers definitely did. That usually meant he had found the truth. Sloane watched him instead of the crowd. The bandage around her palm was clean. She had not offered more fire since the mill, and he had not asked. He wanted the wall test and needed it, but powerful men had a habit of turning need into ownership and calling it strategy. He was trying not to become one of them. A young worker stepped forward, asking about pay. "Promises coin where they have it," he answered. "Grain where coin runs out," witnessed by Silas. Silas opened one eye, grumbling about being volunteered for too many things today, but he is excellent at looking miserable. Official ways. 2 workers laughed, making Silas take slight offense. For 1 second, fear stopped controlling the yard. Then someone dropped from the gate roof and landed right in the middle of them. Gideon had a blade half drawn before. Her boots hit the ground. Sloane's fingers flexed as the workers scattered. The newcomer lifted both hands and grinned as though dropping from a roof was a normal way to attend a work meeting. "Piper Hart, Gideon snapped, telling her to use the stairs. "They are too slow," Piper answered, also guarded by people yelling about witches, which felt pretty unwelcoming. That was how he met Piper Hart, Hearthmere's adept lookout, who was bright-eyed, wrapped in a short travel cloak, and apparently unwilling to use a door. She pointed toward the river road before anyone finished glaring. 3 supply wagons are missing," she reported, "the ones meant for Gatestone. Pitch and winter rope. They were on the road before dawn, but now they are not." The yard turned ugly again. Gideon looked straight at the workers. Who took them? Every worker stiffened. The young one who had asked about wages stepped forward, asking if Gideon thought they stole the wall out from under their own houses. He believes fear makes people stupid. Sloane snapped back, telling him to look in a mirror. The yard went completely silent. Gideon stared at Sloane, and she held his gaze. Her words had insulted him, defended the workers, and reminded everyone she would not stay quiet to make them comfortable. Incredibly efficient. He raised a hand before the argument became their morning entertainment. No accusations without proof. Gideon hated that because he wanted order fast. The workers needed it because they had been waiting for the old version of authority to show up and start swinging. He asked Piper where the wagons turned toward. "The road to Donshield Keep," she replied, "but not by the main bend. Someone used the lower river cut." He looked at Gideon. They had to check it now, even during the test, especially now. Checking the road cost time, and every lost minute felt dangerous, but he would not build his first defense on a false accusation. If the workers had stolen from them, he needed proof. If someone had stolen from them, blaming the workers would help his enemies for free. He took Gideon, Sloane, Silas, Piper, 2 guards, and 3 furious workers refused to let the prince investigate them from a safe distance as frost hardened the road. Past the gate, the winter surge beacon had stopped ringing, but the silence offered no comfort. Suddenly, Piper spotted a torn scrap of wagon canvas caught on a sharp thorn. Right by the lower river cut, deep fresh tracks turned away from Hearthmere. Silas crouched low, studying the heavy mud with a look of pure misery. This was no panic, he muttered. This was planned. A guard pulled a folded paper out from beneath the canvas, its wax seal cracked but still very recognizable. Damon Mercer's seal was stamped dark and neat into the paper. Nobody spoke. His brother had already ordered them to evacuate, clear out the stores, and surrender Sloane. Now the vital supplies for the gate test were redirected toward Dawnshield Keep under his seal. The prince still did not know the full reason. Talk about cold-blooded, his own brother's plan depended on Hearthmere failing. A worker pointed, demanding if they still thought they stole it. Gideon froze. To his credit, he did not dodge, admitting no. The prince demanded he apologize. Turning to the workers, Gideon quietly admitted that he was wrong. That confession cost him dearly. The workers did not forgive him easily. Nobody expected quick forgiveness. What mattered was Gideon taking back the accusation. He did it in public. Silas tucked the document safely into his coat. Silas suggested making copies, but the prince told him that could wait. Right now, the workers needed to know they carried no shame. Sloane watched them closely. Sloane noted that his brother moved fast. He has practice, the prince muttered. Asked about himself, the prince replied that he was learning under hostile conditions. Piper snorted at that, though Silas looked like he was planning the prince's funeral. They returned to the gate with fewer supplies but far better proof. The trade was tough but usable. More workers had gathered in the yard. Still, they did not trust him yet, arriving only because of the growing danger. Stolen wagons could not be ignored. The prince stepped up to speak. The missing wagons were diverted under Damon Mercer's seal, he told them. The workers did not steal them. The crowd listened intently, still hesitant. They debated whether his words were safe. He raised a hand for silence. He stopped them from turning on Damon too quickly. Unrest without food was useless. They were not chasing wagons today. They were building undeniable proof of their strength. No one would call Hearthmere helpless and ship them away. Then the prince opened the emergency grain store. Silas let out a quiet gasp. The prince ordered heavy grain sacks brought directly out into the open yard and divided into work shares before any labor began. The portions were small. They were poor, and pretending otherwise would only cause starvation later. Yet the food was real. A hungry worker could carry it home first. No one had to risk the dangerous witchfire before getting their share. This act shifted the mood far more than his speech. Sloane watched closely. She noted he paid them before the test. He replied he kept promises. She remarked that princes say many things, but he retorted bosses do too. Especially when they expect you to bleed. Her tense expression shifted slightly. She warned him not to forget. The prince promised he was trying. To become a man who needs that reminder twice. Gideon cleared his throat. Apparently complicated feelings were delaying the work. The wall channel was not impressive to look at, just a shallow stone line across the gate. Mouth ugly, unfinished, and missing half the materials Damon had redirected. Its entire job was simple: give Sloane's fire a path, make beasts hesitate, and prove the town could do something besides run. That was all the explanation the workers needed. Any plan he could not explain to frighten people. In one breath was too complicated for the gate. Sloane stood at one end of the channel. How much fire? Enough to turn the charge, he said. Not enough to burn yourself, proving a point. She glanced at his face. That was almost concerned, terrifying. I will file a complaint. The corner of her mouth moved. The smile was small, quick, and absolutely none of his business. His brain still noticed. Gideon set 2 guards behind a beast-sized timber shield, the kind used for training against a rush. The workers had soaked the front with water from the well. Nobody pretended it was the same as a blight beast. The point was not to defeat a monster made of wood. The point was to see whether men charging a gate would break stride when heat hit the line. Ready, Gideon called. Sloane kept her bandaged hand close and sent fire from the other. Blue flame ran low through the stone channel without reaching toward the crowd. Workers murmured as they realized her fire could follow a path and stop there. Charge, Gideon ordered. The guards ran the shield forward. 10 steps, 6. 3. The heat shimmered up. Steam exploded from the soaked wood, and both Guards jerked back hard enough to slam into each other. The shield dropped. No. One burned, no one died. The charge broke before the gate, for 1 second. Everyone in the yard saw that the gate might hold. The workers shouted first. More surprised than proud, one man slapped the stone channel with his glove and yelped because it was still hot. Several people laughed at him. The yard finally had room for a sound besides fear. Gideon walked to the dropped shield, touched the steamed wood, and looked at Sloane. Again. The single word carried respect and another demand. Sloane's shoulders tightened and her bandaged hands stayed close to her side. He recognized the pattern. Useful people got asked for more until they had nothing left. Then everyone praised their dedication. Not yet, he said. Gideon looked annoyed. We need repetition. We need her standing tomorrow, he said, and the next day. One proof is enough for this morning. The workers heard that. Sloane heard it. More, the young worker who had challenged him before stepped forward. If we finish the line, do we get the grain shares first? You get them as you work, he said. No hero debt, no later promises. And if Damon calls us traitors, then he can come say it to the people repairing the gate he stole. From the workers finally cheered. It did not fix the town, but it gave their anger a clear target. Silas wrote the wage order while looking personally injured by common sense. Workers began moving stones. Gideon ordered guards to carry instead of merely supervise, which amused the workers and offended the guards. Piper climbed back to the gate roof, ignored Gideon's order about stairs, and watched the road. Sloane stayed near the channel, but the workers, they no longer formed a wall of suspicion around her. One carried a bucket clothes. Enough for her to take. She declined, and he did not force it. A small choice. Real improvement. By afternoon, they had one working heat line, a public rescue story, a diversion order with Damon's mark, and workers who had received payment before obedience. It was not a finished wall, just proof that Hartsmere had another option besides running. Then Piper whistled from the gate roof. Every head turned up. She crouched on the parapet, hair snapping. In the cold wind, grin gone, she spotted a silver sanctum rider on the south road. She warned. The rider watched the test, then headed for the lower wells. The lower wells fed half the town's water buckets. Sloane's flame died in the channel. He looked at the steaming stone, the workers, the sealed order in Silas's coat, and the road where the rider had vanished. They proved the wall could work. They also proved exactly where their enemies needed to press. Damon could reach their supplies. The silver sanctum was already watching their proof, and if the next lie landed near the wells, Sloane's first public victory might become the thing they used to hang her again. The silver sanctum did not attack them with soldiers first. They attacked with a dead goat, a crying witness, and the confidence of people who had practiced lying in public. By the time Gideon and he reached the lower wells, half the gate yard had followed them. Sloane kept her bandaged hand close to her body. Silas came behind them, clutching his notebook to his chest. At that point, their records had survived more attacks than his authority. The lower wells sat below the market roofs and supplied half of Hearthmere, a lie that could spread through town before the water buckets did. A dead goat lay beside the main trough with black marks across its flank. From a distance, the marks resembled burned fingers. People stood far enough away to miss the smell and close enough to decide Sloane was guilty. The fired executioner stood beside the trough with tears on his cheeks and both hands lifted for attention. He had seen that man hold a torch over Sloane's chains without blinking. Watching him discover public grief after losing his job did not improve his mood. He claimed he saw her fire near the well, shouting it was a blue flame, same as the gate where the beast Blight appeared, claiming she poisoned the water. Sloane stopped walking. The crowd turned toward Sloane with visible relief. Simple enemy was easier than uncertainty. The silver sanctum envoy stood near the well in pale robes and let the executioner do the lying for him. Gideon stepped closer to the goat, but stopped when the crowd hissed for no one to touch it. Sloane remarked how convenient it was, her quiet voice cutting through the square, reminding them they wanted her burned this morning. Now their goat dies, and they remember her face. The executioner pointed at her at once. He yelled that she was mocking them. The crowd instantly leaned toward the accusation. Sloane's shoulders lowered, not in surrender but with the exhaustion of someone who already knew how much pain the square wanted from her. She looked at him, asking if this would stop if she surrendered. His stomach went cold. Fear did not always need chains. Sometimes it made the hunted person surrender first, because watching everyone else suffer felt worse No, the prince argued. It only teaches them that lying is cheap. The envoy finally smiles, claiming she understands the danger. She understands mob math, the prince replies, but that is different. The executioner cries harder. His performance is wet, obvious, and deeply punchable. A woman's voice cuts through from the shadow beneath the trough. Roof, if you're done crying, smell the goat. Every guard draws. Steel heat flashes over Sloane's fingers. A woman steps from behind the Stone's hands fully visible, a knife at her hip, a dark cloak covers her. She eyes every exit unimpressed. Sage Quinn, she says. Gideon swears under his breath. Another witch, a useful one, she adds. If the prince can actually use his nose, she points toward the witness cart, warning him not to wash it. Instantly, the executioner's face pales. That reaction is the first real proof, not a confession, just a guilty man's early panic. The prince approaches the goat. Gideon grabs his sleeve. Your Highness, if this beast kills me, write down I died doing advanced royal goat inspection, not a plan. Gideon sighs. Sloane mutters it is barely a sentence. Her insults mean she has not surrendered to their religious theater. The prince crouches. From 10 steps away, the burn marks look dramatic, but up close they smell completely wrong. No clean smoke. No sign of Sloane's blue heat. Greasy lamp oil clings to the hair, smelling exactly like the executioner's torch from this morning. He stands to face the crowd. The goat was oiled. The envoy's smile thins, claiming a witch can fake any scent. That was almost a sentence, the prince replies. Prove it with evidence. Sloane's eyes flick to him. The square waits to see if he will make her burn again. He hates the answer. Is yes, leaving this as his word against a liar solves absolutely nothing. He turns to her. Small flame, only if you choose. Sloane scans the crowd, the well, and Sage waiting in the shadow. She lifts 2 fingers, a thin, controlled thread of blue fire. Sparks. The prince takes a clean scrap of dry wool from a worker and near the flame it curls and browns. No greasy smoke appears. Then he touches the scrap to the goat's flank. Wool flashes yellow, spitting an oily stink. People recoil. It is lamp oil. Silas calls out, always spotting evidence before anyone else. The executioner backs toward a cart parked under the well awning. Gideon spots the movement and grabs his collar before he can make it. 3 steps. I was told to bring water. The executioner yells out. He claims he did not know what was inside. The crowd hears the word told. Sage leans against the post, amused. Silas immediately approaches the cart with 2 of the guards. He lifts a prayer cloth from the back, finding a hidden oil jug. Beneath, the same greasy smell rolls out, alongside a singed strip of rope and goat hair stuck to black paste. The square instantly. Nobody dared to move. Some stared at the cart, but many stared harder at Sloane. Blaming her was far easier than admitting their holy accusation was a fraud. It arrived with props. He pointed straight at the cart. Is that the miracle? He asked. The angry envoy demanded if he trusted a shadow. Which over the holy sanctum? No, Everett countered. He simply trusted oil when it actually smelled like oil. One worker laughed, then another. It was not enough to win the crowd, but it made the envoy's mouth tighten. Sloane let the small flame die, her hand shaking. Afterward, she hid it inside her sleeve before the crowd could feast on her weakness. He wanted to ask if she was okay, but the entire square was watching them closely for any sign of fear. Everett kept his voice steady. Sloane Vale did not burn that goat, he announced. The witness carried oil. Silas has the jug and Gideon has the witness. That is the record. Still, they yelled the water was cursed. The first lie had failed, so the angry crowd produced another. A woman at the back screamed that the grain store held witch wages. Inside, a man shouted that the rope was tainted. 2 sanctum supporters broke from the crowd, running uphill toward the storehouse before Gideon could push through the mob. The envoy did not order them to run. He did not need to, honestly. Seeing that smug expression makes you want to throw hands. Get on it, Everett snapped. Gideon threw the heavy executioner at 2 guards hard, enough to ruin his dignity, before sprinting uphill with half his squad. Sloane moved to follow, claiming she could stop the fire. Everett caught her arm, then released her. Once she glared at his hand. Not in a storehouse full of pitch. He warned, unless you choose to and have a clear escape route. Anger flashed across her face. Then she looked uphill where dark smoke began to climb. Over the roofs, you are going to lose materials, she warned. Yes, because you are stopping me, he replied, because he refused to sacrifice her to fix their riot. The hard decision stung because it was right, but being right would not replace The lost rope, they ran uphill anyway, finding the storehouse doors forced wide open. With workers fighting each other inside, a shattered lantern lay on the stones. Winter. Rope burned along the wall and thick pitch leaked into the straw, the wooden. Braces for the next gate were dragged into the mud and hacked apart by people. Claiming they were saving Hearthmere from witchcraft, Everett had witnessed some incredibly stupid sabotage back in his old corporate life, but this is next level bad. At least office politics did not involve torches. Get buckets, Everett bellowed, throw water on the rope and sand on the pitch, disobey, and you lose rations. Until the wall stands, that threat worked. Faster than any generic orders, hunger made it personal. Gideon loudly slammed the flat of his blade against a support beam, the deafening crack silencing half the yard. Get back from the shelves, he roared. Sloane stayed at the edge. Her hands tightly clenched. People watched her, waiting for either rescue or disaster. She gave them neither. Using fire here would only prove the lie, so she held back. Her discipline saved lives but cost them supplies. By the time the smoke finally thinned, the rope was gone, 2 pitch barrels wasted, and half the spare braces lay snapped under boots. The north gate still had one working heat line, but the second had become a pile of expensive kindling and public ruin. Silas arrived last, coughing heavily with an oil jug under his arm and open fury burning on his face. It was the most alive Silas had looked all day. The witness card was secured, he muttered. The well water was clear, and the goat remained unfortunate, he added. The storehouse loss. Silas stared at the smoking ruins in shock. Winced, muttering he would rather be accused of heresy. Give it an hour. Sage suddenly materialized right beside a broken shelf, without crossing the yard in any normal way, making half the guards flinch. She ignored them, looking directly at Sloane first. Not him, you did not run, she noted. Sloane replied flatly, admitting she considered it. Sage called that healthy thinking before turning to him. The old trick was sloppy, she said. Sloppy meant rushed, and rushed meant they expected the panic to carry itself. Who are they, he asked. Sage's mouth tilted, saying earn the answer. Sage's answer was frustrating but incredibly useful. She had not arrived as his ally, but was testing him. Still, she had exposed the oil in public so the crowd could not pretend the evidence never existed. Yet, the crowd around the storehouse still did not look convinced. Some stared at the oil jug, some at the burned rope. Some even glared at Sloane, blaming her for the broken supplies because the truth had failed to make them feel better fast enough. This damaged trust was the real loss. They proved the goat was staged. Sloane had not surrendered, but the executioner had been caught with oil. Sage Quinn had stepped out of the shadows, making the saint's miracle look incredibly cheap. And still, Hearthmere ended the day with less wall, less rope, less trust, and far more frightened people inside its gates. Truth had won the argument, but not the actual crowd. By dusk, the lower wells were finally open. The goat was gone, and the storehouse still reeked of smoke. He stood beside Sloane in the wreckage but here is the real catch. The winter surge would not wait for Hearthmere to finish deciding whether they deserved to survive. The first blight beast did not wait for his wall to look heroic. It arrived while half his town was still arguing about goat evidence. The storehouse smoke had barely thinned when Piper dropped from a roof near the north gate, landing hard and skidding on one knee. That was how he knew the warning was bad. Piper Hart usually landed cleanly. She warned him of a fresh, massive trail on the ridge road coming fast. Gideon immediately checked the unfinished gate and the broken braces beside the storehouse. Seeing the calculation on his face, they had one working heat line, no spare rope, wasted pitch, frightened workers, and a crowd still divided over Sloane. Gideon called for evacuation to Dawn's Shield Keep. The words hit the yard hard because everyone knew he meant them. Gideon was no coward. He was a captain staring at a compromised defense, choosing the option that kept the most people breathing. He hated that his reasonable answer matched Damon's orders. If they run now, he argued, the road decides who lives. The elderly, injured workers, children, anyone without a cart. They already knew how that math ended. If we stay, Gideon countered, the beast reaches a gate we cannot finish. Sloane stood near the heat line, pale from the well square in the smoke. Do not fight it at the gate, she suggested. Everyone looked at her. She pointed down the narrow street between the mill wall and the old grain sheds, explaining it could not turn wide or rush the crowd. Right away, Sloane offered Hearth her defense plan first. Defensive strategy before anyone even requested her fire. She was not waiting to be pointed at a problem. She saw the same narrow street he did and chose how to use He turned to Gideon, proposing a street trap. Gideon grimaced. The civilians had to be moved. No speeches. Gideon ordered the guards. Door to door, Piper dashed across the rooftops, shouting for residents to evacuate. Workers dragged carts into the narrow street to create a funnel. He ordered the buckets hauled up, and the former rioters immediately began carrying water. Without arguing, finally their guilt was useful. Then a massive roar erupted from beyond the northern gate before their defensive trap was even remotely set. He heard the term Blight Beast mentioned multiple times, but the name had not prepared him. The monster, crashing through the outer ditch, had dark bones beneath a frozen hide and far too many teeth in its lowered head. It charged across the ground faster than any creature of that size ever should. The panicked crowd scattered. Gideon pushed through the panic, yelling to hold. A guard shoved a worker out of the beast's path, taking the vicious blow himself. A massive claw struck the guard's ribs, throwing him back into a wooden cart with bone-shattering force. He hit the cold stones without making a sound, which terrified the prince completely. Suddenly, a mysterious woman pushed through the frantic crowd before Gideon could stop her. She wore a dusty wool cloak with messy gray hair and moved with complete composure, telling Piper to hold her sleeve. This was June Alder. She immediately knelt beside the wounded guard, pressing her hands against the shattered armor. A soothing warm glow erupted from her fingers, instantly slowing the bleeding. The guard gasped for air and began coughing violently as the crowd fell silent. It seemed Hearthmere possessed far more hidden magic than anyone had ever mentioned. To the prince, June grew incredibly pale, her shoulders dipping. She kept her hands steady until the guard's breathing normalized. Then she collapsed, but the prince caught her elbow. He asked if she could stand. Though she nodded, her knees shook. She was determined to keep helping. Suddenly, 3 desperate citizens reached out for her. One begged for his injured brother, while another tightly grabbed her clothes. He stepped between them instantly, his newly acquired royal reflexes finally paying off. He sternly warned them that nobody touches June, nor asks her twice. She decided whom she helped, and if she said stop, it meant stop. June stared at him, showing no gratitude, merely testing if his promise was genuine. Local magic users had learned to treat basic kindness as a temporary luxury. That could vanish instantly. He began to hate how much sense that made. Suddenly, the monster smashed into the first barricade, sending wooden debris flying everywhere. Terrified workers fled. Sloane raised both hands as her fire reacted violently. Brilliant blue flames swept across the cobblestones, engulfing the shattered cart in seconds. The heat made nearby roofs steam, forcing the monster to pause momentarily. Then it suddenly leaped through the heavy smoke. Sloane desperately channeled more power into her spell. Her face turned pale as the flames began to waver wildly. She was pushing herself to the absolute limit to protect the panicking townspeople. He managed to catch her just before she fell backwards to the ground. If he stops, the beast gets through, but at least she stays alive. She looks furious, but her knees buckle, letting him drag her too. Steps behind the cart line. Accepting his help is not weakness, it is the first time she trusts his judgment in battle, and he feels the heavy weight of it. Suddenly, the beast charges through the steam. He spots water buckets nearby and gets a useful idea. Throw water on the stones, he shouts, not at the beast, on the burning stones. The first worker hesitates, but the rescued mill worker immediately grabs a bucket with both hands, throwing water across the hot coals. Scalding steam explodes up between them and the beast. Then another worker follows suit, then another. The narrow street vanishes behind blinding white heat and wet stone, providing perfect cover. They need cover, he yells for Gideon, who is already charging forward with 6 militia. Through the steam from a side alley, shields held low and spears pointed forward. The blinded beast strikes hard, hitting sturdy wood instead of flesh. Sloane, breathing heavily nearby, sends a single controlled whip of fire ripping across the ground, not at the crowd nor at the rooftops, but straight across the beast's front legs. It stumbles, and Gideon drives his spear deep under its jaw. The militia strikes together. It is not clean or pretty. There is mud, steam, screaming, and one guard slipping on spilled water while another begs for more pressure on the shields, but they hold long enough for Gideon to wrench his spear deeper. The massive blight beast thrashes once, crashing heavily into the cart barrier before dropping hard enough to shake the dust from the nearby sheds. Nobody believes it is dead until Piper lands on a broken cart and yells, "If it moves again, I am retiring from rooftops." You can practically feel the sheer relief in that thin laughter. Everyone needed a break from the terror. Screaming, Gideon keeps his spear pinned in the beast until the body finally stops. Twitching, he looks through the steam and yells for Sloane, who is still. Leaning heavily against his arm, she forces herself to stand straight before answering. Captain, the line held because of you, she says. It is no apology, and Gideon does not give those out easily in public, yet he credited Sloane where everyone could. Here, showing his clear respect, June checks on the wounded guard again, then sits on a nearby crate before her trembling legs give out entirely. The guard reaches for her hand to thank her. June smiles tiredly. Keep breathing, she says, it makes my work look better. A few people laugh softly, then turn their eyes to June with. It is wild how quickly gratitude turns into demands when people are this terrified. When terrified people see no other answer, he raises his voice before that frantic hunger finds hands. June healed a man and nearly collapsed. She rests now. And anyone who objects can explain to Gideon why they want their healer unconscious. Before the next beast attack, Gideon does not smile. He tilts his bloody spear slightly and nobody dares argue. The rescued mill worker steps out into the open street. His leg is still bandaged from the boiler rescue, and he has soot on one side of his face from the bucket line. He looks at Sloane, then at the crowd that had blamed her beside the well less than an hour earlier. She saved me in the mill, he says, and nobody interrupts him this time. He points at the dead blight beast, stating she saved them here too, along with the healer and the captain. He tells them to stop calling every woman who keeps them alive a curse. It is not a polished speech, but it is far better. The man once feared Sloane. The bloody bandages proved she saved him. The crowd could easily dismiss the prince. But ignoring a living neighbor was a much harder task for them. Especially when the condemned witch chose restraint. Sloane looked away. He pretended not to notice, giving her the privacy she deserved. The street felt completely different now, not fixed but undeniably changed. Workers who once avoided Sloane now made a path for her to sit. A woman brought water to June without touching her. A guard gently helped Piper down from the cart before Gideon could start shouting about roofs again. Hearthmere was not enlightened, it was just deeply embarrassed. The prince could work with that. Suddenly, a royal rider arrived at the gate. He rode in wearing royal colors, while his horse shied from the carcass. Classic Damon, terrible right on schedule. The rider held out a scroll. It was a decree from Prince Damon Mercer. Absolutely nobody cheered. Yesterday, that name would have terrified him. Today, it felt quite insignificant. He broke the royal seal himself. Damon's message was brief and efficient. Hearthmere had to abandon the town before nightfall and move all supplies. If the prince refused, all royal support would vanish instantly. Every single death would be blamed on him. Talk about a dirty trap. Damon waited until their defenses were shattered and the town was divided. Then he demanded total obedience as the only way to survive. Gideon read the decree over his shoulder with a tense expression. But he kept quiet. Sloane sat nearby, resting on an overturned crate. She clutched her ribs, looking pale after pushing her powers too far. June rested a few steps away. Piper watched the road in silence. The dead monster proved they could survive, but at a cost. The crowd waited in silence for the prince to choose which danger they would face. He folded the paper and looked down the street they had just defended. He told the rider that they received his brother's concerns. The rider frowned, asking if that was indeed the prince's final response. The prince refused. Hearthmere just killed a beast without fleeing. If Damon wants abandonment, he can explain why survival offends him. This bold refusal did not feel like victory. It felt highly dangerous. Yet the beast was dead, and June had exposed her secret. Gideon had respected Sloane in public, and the crowd was changing. Naturally, Damon responded to this win by cutting off royal support. The battle proved they could survive monsters. Now the prince had to prove they could survive greedy nobles who wanted them helpless. Damon's order arrived right after they defeated the beast, showing calculated timing. He was not afraid they would fail. He was afraid they might actually succeed. The royal rider waited beside the dead beast. He stood near a dead beast, an exhausted healer, and a defiant crowd. They survived without royal permission. The decree in his hand demanded evacuation, but the dead beast proved otherwise. The rider treated this refusal as a delay, insisting his lord expected compliance. The prince replied that his brother expected far too much. That seems emotionally difficult for him, he noted, but nobody laughed. The joke had come from fear, not amusement. Sloane sat on the overturned crate with Both hands tight over her ribs, June leaned against the wall, still pale from healing the mauled guard. Gideon kept his spear planted in the dead beast. Until he was certain it would not move, Silas held Damon's order with both hands. Then Sage Quinn stepped out from the smoke beside the grain shed. Every guard flinched, but Sage ignored them, holding up 3 torn strips of paper and a little bundle wrapped in oilcloth. If they wanted to know why his brother cared, they had to stop arguing with the delivery boy and read the reply. The writer snapped that she was a witch. Good eye, Sage shot back. Did the horse tell you? He took the papers before the writer could get brave. The handwriting was broken across folds and water stains, but the important words survived. Gate supplies diverted, winter stores transferred, and Dawnshield keep wood. Take credit. Hearthmere labor count. Silas went completely still beside him. He looked at him. Plain words. He hated plain words when they were dangerous, but used them anyway. When Hearthmere evacuates, Dawnshield keep receives their grain or labor carts and royal credit for sheltering them. The street quieted. Silas swallowed and kept going. If Hearthmere stays, Dawnshield keep loses the stores and the claim that they cannot survive without them. The papers did not reveal every hidden order, but they proved the main point. Hearthmere had not merely been neglected. Dawnshield keep benefited when their town failed on schedule. The writer tried to take a step back, but Gideon noticed, moving one boot into his path. Sage tossed the oilcloth bundle to Silas. He opened it and found a small ledger strip, a snapped seal edge, and a bit of dark gray stone wrapped in cloth. Sloane saw the stone and went rigid. Null stone, she whispered, silencing the entire street. Raw cuff marks still circled Sloane's wrists. Every witch understood what the stone meant, and even the townspeople who feared them stepped away. Sage looked at him. The Sanctum Trail follows the same winter route. She did not have the whole answer yet, but had enough to know someone is moving fear, supplies, and orders through the same chain. He understood the limit. They had enough evidence to act, not enough to claim every private detail. The truth would only help them if he kept each accusation inside what the papers could prove. Silas compared the broken seal edge to Damon's diversion order from the river. Cut then to the new abandonment order. His mouth tightened. Same courier chain. The writer stammered, calling them stolen fragments. Yes, Sage agreed, she stole them from people stealing a town. She was devastated by the moral tension. The crowd shifted toward the writer instead of away from Sloane. Workers looked from the dead blight beast to the road to Dawnshield Keep. The beast had frightened them. The papers showed them who benefited from that fear. He could have turned that anger loose. It would have felt good for about 10 seconds. Then Hearthmere would have burned its last strength, yelling at a writer while the winter surge kept moving. So he folded Damon's order and handed it to Silas, announcing they were going to the charter hall. Silas blinked. Now, yes now. Sloane stood too fast. She swayed, catching herself before he could reach out. What charter? She asked. Her voice sounded calm, but the fear underneath was obvious. He looked at the dead beast. Torn orders, June's tired face, Sage's stolen fragments, and Gideon's bloody spear. The crowd waited to see if he would use this proof as another leash, a very public one. If Hearthmere survives because witches choose to help, then Hearthmere must protect witches in public. The scribe barked a laugh. You cannot write away heresy, the scribe scoffed. No, but he could make cowardice expensive. They moved through Hearthmere with the crowd behind them. Nobody sang or cheered. The slain beast lay dragged aside, the fresh blood reminding everyone of the danger and what they needed to protect. Soon, they reached the cold charter hall. A long room inside the keep with flickering candles, cold walls, and a scarred table. Silas lined up the evidence. First came Damon's abandonment order. Then the diversion order, a witness token, oil records, and a rescued worker's statement. Plus Sage's fragments. Silas kept the nullstone scrap wrapped and far away, hidden safely from Sloane and June. Sloane stood opposite them, her arms tightly folded. A contract with a prince is still just a contract with a prince. The accusation hung heavy in the room. He was glad they all heard it. Public mistrust felt far more honest. Yes, he agreed, making Silas close his eyes. He continued speaking before his scribe could object, but Sloane cut in. A pretty chain is still a chain, Sloane warned. Write all the wages you want. Write about protection and choice, but the paper still sits in your hands. The absolute silence in that room was loud enough to make your hair stand. But he stopped and chose to listen instead. Sloane was not attacking his character. She was pointing out how easily this deal could turn into forced obedience later. If he got scared, so he declared, this charter cannot be about control. It must protect what no one is allowed to take. Hearing this, June looked up. Rest, she murmured. He looked at her. If this paper truly protects us. June continued, her voice flat with exhaustion. Then it must protect the word. Stop our healing fire, wind, all of it. Stop means stop, even in danger. When everyone is bleeding, several nearby townspeople flinched because they remembered grabbing at her after the attack. Good, guilt was doing its job. Write it, the prince commanded Silas. The scribe held his pen with dread, looking like he was writing out treason. Your Highness, wording matters, he warned. Then keep it short enough for panicked citizens to easily remember, he countered. Silas looked personally offended, but his pen quickly moved. Gideon stepped up next, stating the guards still needed authority to protect both witches from the crowd, and the crowd if magic ever spiraled out of control. Sloane glared at him, but Gideon held her gaze. The prince spoke up, recalling how Sloane pulled her fire off a wounded millworker and held the line. Without hurting civilians, no one here is calling you a monster. For a guard captain, that confession was huge. Sloane still looked cold. But the heavy tension in the room broke. The captain who wanted her arrested just admitted before everyone that their blind fear was not actual evidence. Write that down too, the prince ordered. The guard protects all chartered witches. From sudden arrests, angry mobs, and forced labor, anyone breaking the law pays. Judge the act, not the blood, and never the rumor. Silas wrote down the draft while the prince paced the room. Sage guarded the door while June sat only after being offered a chair. Sloane chose to remain standing. The prince let her be. Once Silas finished the draft, he read it aloud with a steady, official voice. He feared every sentence, yet committed to writing each one anyway. The new charter recognized any adult witch in their lands as a free citizen, never to be treated as property or hunted by rumors. No witch could be forced to use power or denied fair wages and protection. Silas paused, his throat tight, as complete silence filled the room. No one spoke. This was not a perfect law, nor was it a complete system. But it was a public rule forged in a brutal winter. This mattered because rules were constantly changing on them. Sloane stared at the paper. The prince did not ask for her trust just yet. One paragraph changed nothing. He signed first. He took the risk. His own name would bear the weight before anyone else had to touch it. Silas hesitated, then he took the pen. His hand shook once. He despised treason, but the evidence made neutral ground impossible now. Captain Gideon signed next. Behind him, the royal guards shifted uneasily. One guard whispered his title, but Gideon ignored him, speaking aloud. He watched Sloane kill the beast and saw June save a dying soldier. If soldiers accept their magic, they must also witness their protection. This moment right here changed everything for the guards of Hearthmere. He put his full military authority behind protecting these outcasts in public. June stepped up next, her fingers still weak from the ordeal. She carefully reread the final line before slowly putting down her signature. She looked at the prince, asking what happens if he is the one begging. The room fell dead silent. The prince looked at Sloane. He gave his answer: if he begs, they must say no even louder. June signed, but Sage flatly refused, crossing her arms in silent protest. She claimed she never signs anything she has not fully tested first. The prince noted she still stole evidence for a ruler she distrusted. She told him not to get sentimental. Her defiance did not sting. Her true value was proof, not blind obedience to his crown. The charter had to protect even those choices that did not flatter him. Now look closely. The most dangerous witch in the room steps forward. She slowly read the lines guaranteeing her freedom, banning any forced service. She read the final line, stating rumors could not surrender her to mobs. Her thumb brushed the raw scar on her wrist, left by magic binding Nullstone. She warned that if he broke this deal, she would leave instantly. He readily agreed. Surprised, she asked if that was truly his answer. If trapping her was his only hold, then he was the enemy. His sarcasm stopped. She survived the stake. She saved his men. Yet she still had to wonder if safety was just gilded ownership. Her doubt made him deeply angry at the world and incredibly cautious. The authority is set. Sloane signs last. No magic flame rises and nobody changes because a pen scratches paper. June releases a long breath. Gideon lowers his chin. Silas presses sand over the fresh ink. Sage watches Sloane instead of Everett. Her suspicion looks more protective than hostile. Everett picks up the charter and carries it outside. The crowd waiting in the keep yard has grown. Workers from the gate, families from the mill street, and guards with beast blood on their Boots, these are the people who hate witches, but hate being used even more than they. Hate being wrong. Standing on the steps, Everett reads the Hearthmere Charter aloud. He does not perform it or make it noble. He keeps his voice plain because plain words survive panic much better. When he finishes, nobody cheers at first. Then the rescued worker from the mill raises his bandaged leg a few inches, speaking up. He mutters that it is about time, breaking the silence. A few workers clap. A woman who had called Sloane cursed at the well looks down at her hands. One guard starts toward June's chair but remembers. The rest claws and steps back. This charter has already changed one person's behavior. The silver sanctimancer arrives before sunset, a silver road. Ryder enters the keepyard with 2 guards, boasting the posture of a man certain. Heaven endorses him personally. He carries a black-edged summons sealed. Pale wax. Silas sees the seal, whispering it is a full heresy summons. The writer reads it in the yard so everyone can hear, by order of High Prior Malcolm Creed. Everett is summoned for sheltering condemned witches, obstructing the sanctum's harsh judgment, arming heresy during the winter surge, and corrupting Hearthmere with unlawful charter protection. Then he names Sloane. Gideon's guards move before Everett orders them, not forward but around her. Sloane notices, so does the writer, so does everyone in the yard. The chart has not made them safe, it has made the next attack honest. Everett takes the summons from the writer, folds it, and hands it to Silas, telling him to record that Malcolm issued this after the charter was read, and after Sloane helped kill the first beast. The writer's mouth twists. High Prior Creed will not be intimidated by this small town. Everett replies that he should try it, saying they are developing a terrible habit of surviving things meant to impress them. The line earns a few hard smiles. Then he looks at the charter in Silas's hands and feels what it has cost them. Damon has threatened to cut them off. Malcolm has named them heretics. Down the road, Dawn's Shield Keep still waits with plenty of food, strong walls, and a corrupt system that profits every time Hearthmere runs scared. But Sloane's name is on the charter by choice. June's rest is public. Gideon's guards move to protect witches without needing any grand speeches. Sage has shown him the first real path right beneath Damon's trap. He simply wanted proof that Hearthmere can survive without using desperate people until they break. By dusk, he has signed that promise in front of witnesses. Now the witnesses have to live long enough for it to matter. The charter sounds noble until hungry. People stand outside his gate, and their grain stores cannot feed them. The first knock comes before dawn. It is panicked hammering against the outer gate, loud enough to bring guards to steal and workers out of bed. He reaches the gate yard with his coat half fastened and the Hearthmere charter. Barely a day had passed, and Sloane was already there, standing right by the inner winch. One hand stayed close to her knife, her other hand still bandaged from yesterday. June followed, pale but upright. Silas arrived with a ledger and a stressed face. He looked like a man who had already counted their food twice. From across the heavy gate, a child coughed. That sound shifted the yard faster than any royal order. A monster would have been easier. This threat was just a sick kid. Shivering outside the gate, the guard looked down and announced, "Refugees, Your Highness. At least 30 with more coming." Silas closed his eyes, muttering they simply could not take more mouths. The prince nodded, but Silas stressed they could not feed their own people fed. The prince knew that too. Suddenly the gate shook as a desperate man begged. He cried out that Dawn's Shield Keep had turned them away, and that the main road was completely blocked. Children were freezing in the ditches, alongside a woman who not woken since midnight. The entire yard waited for the prince to choose the cruel path of practicality. The charter had been easy compared to this. Paper did not eat, refugees did. Sloane looked at him, not pushing, not pleading, simply checking if his mercy stopped where their supplies did. He hated that. The decision would cost something real. He ordered them to open the gate 1 cart width. Children injured and sick first. No weapons allowed. Southyard shelter only. That was the only shelter until they counted the road. Silas made a strangled sound. If there were more, the prince wanted to know before pretending 30 was the only problem. The guards lifted the bar. Bitterly cold air rushed inside. It was followed by exhausted, freezing travelers. One man carried a small child under his cloak. 2 older women held each other upright, while a young mother shuffled inside. Had a feverish boy tied to her back. Absolutely nobody looked like an invading soldier. That pathetic sight made the choice much harder, not easier. Hearthmere's own citizens gathered close, and their fear quickly turned into anger. One worker shouted they barely had grain. while another pointed directly at Sloane. They blamed witches for bringing strangers. Sloane's face went blank, a look the prince hated. She was trying to hide her pain before the hostile crowd could weaponize it against her. The prince turned on the worker, declaring the gate opened solely by his personal command. If they needed someone to blame, they could blame him. Being called useless was nothing new. His pride could handle the insults. A few people almost laughed. Crucially, the anger shifted entirely from Sloane to the one who ordered the gate opened. June stepped toward the feverish boy, but his mother pulled back in deep suspicion. She panicked when June's hands began to glow, but June gently noted he was burning up. Mother looked around nervously, then stared at the charter nailed near the inner gate. She could not read it from that distance, but she saw the guards keeping their distance. Guards gave June space, while Sloane stood beside the prince without any chains. The mother whispered her plea. June looked at the prince, who answered immediately. He told her it was her choice. June knelt in the dirt. Placing 2 fingers against the boy's forehead, a soft, warm light glowed beneath his skin. It was not bright or flashy, but his labored breathing eased almost instantly. His fingers unclenched from his mother's collar. The entire yard exhaled. Suddenly, 3 refugees surged forward, begging for help for their sick wives and fathers. They begged the healer. Before June finished helping one, desperate cries erupted. Desperate refugees are already reaching for more. June sways, but Sloane moves first. Not using fire, she steps between June and those desperate hands, her voice cutting sharp. Back, Sloane barks, freezing the refugees instantly because she clearly means it. Everett steps right beside her, announcing the town charter applies at the gate. June stops when she says stop, and anyone grabbing her gets kicked out immediately. One refugee stares in shock, pleading that she is the only one who can save them. Yes, Everett replies, but people are not wells to drain just because you are thirsty. Those cold words silence the crowd and Hearthmere's own weary workers. Everett feels the weight of it, having needed that exact boundary in his past life. June finishes with the feverish boy, telling them he just needs water, sleep, and warmth. She can treat only 2 more before sunrise, so Everett repeats the limit louder. 2 more, then she stops. Nobody likes the rule, showing Everett the boundary is real. Silas pulls Everett aside as guards guide the first group into the south yard. 2 more quickly becomes 10, Silas warns, and this temporary shelter will soon become permanent. If another wave arrives, the grain supplies will break, so Everett demands the ugly truth. Silas looks from the refugees to their own workers, admitting they might all starve together. If they turn people away, Damon gets dead bodies on the road to label Everett a murderer. It is a brutal trap. Close the gates and let innocent people die on the road. Or open them and slowly starve the entire town, letting Damon declare it a total failure. Sage suddenly appears behind Silas, making him jump so hard he nearly drops his ledger. Damon won't even need to wait for bodies, Sage warns, because he already blocked the road. Everett spins around, asking if she saw it, but Sage gestures toward the wall. Piper did. The scout drops down from the high stone wall, landing rather heavily. She catches herself against a nearby wooden barrel, her signature playful grin completely gone. That missing smile worries Everett way more than her limp as she delivers the news. The main road to Donshield Keep is closed by royal barricades under Damon's colors, turning everyone else toward the river cut. The refugees whisper. Everyone here understands that Damon redirected these desperate people. Silas looks incredibly sick, muttering that their enemy is forcing their hand. No, Everett corrects him. Damon is actually trying to force the blame on them. Hyper displays a piece of torn rope with dark seal wax still clinging to it. Silas takes the material, his hands steady despite the lingering fear that still haunts him. Sloane looks past the crowd toward the open gate, warning about their fragile charter. If Damon sends enough refugees, this charter just becomes useless scrap wood. Only if they let him decide what it actually means, Everett counter-argues quietly. When food runs out, what then? Everett has no clean answer for her. He looks across the yard, seeing refugees huddle under patched awnings. Hearthmere's own workers hold smaller soup bowls, avoiding eye contact with hungry children. June sits beside the sleeping fever boy, while Sloane stands watch over them. It means feeding the sick and the children first, Everett decides firmly. It means Hearthmere workers eat too, and nobody gets to hoard resources out of fear. Or call generosity treason, Everett adds. Silas exhales softly through his nose. That is not a plan, Silas mutters, but Everett knows it is a start. It is the only truth they can hear without turning into desperate animals. Silas gives a single, sharp nod. That agreement carries them into the busy mid-morning. The second wave of refugees reached the gate, not 30 but closer to 60, too many children. And too many elderly, so many people with frostbitten fingers and stories that all ended exactly the same way. Dawnshield Keep soldiers had blocked the road and pointed them toward Hearthmere, claiming the useless prince had witchfire too. Spare, that rumor spread through the yard quickly. Witchfire to spare, a refugee man repeated those words while thanking Sloane for the warmth. His gratitude was real, but so was the insult. Her shoulders tightened and the prince remembered the raw marks on her wrists. No, he said loudly. Enough for the south yard to hear. Sloane's fire does not spare anything she chooses. Each use, Hearthmere does not own her just because Damon spread a rumor with his mouth. The refugee man looked confused. The prince meant no harm. Most people do not. Sloane muttered, they just arrive with a desperate need and call it harmless. Her answer stopped him better than the prince's anger. June lifted her head from the crate, announcing she was done until sunset. The yard resisted her decision. People looked from coughing relatives to June's pale face, then to the prince and the charter. Nailed by the gate, he did not soften the blow, stating June was done until sunset. Only water, blankets, and ordinary hands until then, one angry refugee cursed. Hearthmere worker snapped back that ordinary hands were the only reason the awning stood. The men almost fought over a blanket until Sloane picked up the blanket, walked directly between them, and placed it over a sleeping feverish boy. No flame, no threat, just a choice so simple both men looked embarrassed. People. You see, they feared Sloane's fire so much they missed what her restraint exposed. About them, the south yard settled into a tense order, not peace. Children stayed near the inner wall and the injured rested under the awnings. Hearthmere workers received grain by shift and refugees by need. Everyone hated the line, yet still asked the prince where to stand. Near noon, a silver-robed messenger slipped through the outer gate with the third refugee wave. The prince did not see him at first. Silas and the prince were arguing over whether old flour from Hearthmere Keep was safe enough to use. The answer was uncertain, matching most of his troubled rule. Sage saw the messenger and did not stop him. That would bother the prince later. At the time, she only moved along the shade of the wall, her eyes fixed on his pale sleeve threading through the crowd. The messenger finally reached Sloane near the water barrels. The prince saw him bow and saw Sloane's hand go still on the cup she was filling. The messenger said something too low for anyone to hear over the yard noise, then offered a folded paper sealed in pale wax. Sloane did not take it at first. The messenger spoke one more thing. This time, Sloane took the paper and slid it into her sleeve. The prince started toward them, but a sudden fight broke out at the shelter line before he made it 3 steps. A Hearthmere man shoved a refugee away from a bread basket. The refugee shoved right back and a child fell between them. The prince rushed to the child, because immediate harm mattered more than a secret letter in that moment. By the time the fight was stopped, the silver-robed messenger had vanished back through the gate. Sloane was still standing by the water barrels, her face completely blank and controlled. What did he want? The prince asked. Sanctum poison, she said. It was not a lie, but an evasion built from enough truth to make a second question feel intrusive. Before the prince could push, June called for help with an old woman collapsed near the awning. He stared at Sloane for one final second. She stared back as if she were daring him to turn his concern into a command, so he respected her silent answer. Knowing she was right, the threat, however, was real. Sage stepped beside him as he approached June, hiding the paper and whispering she saw. He had not asked, but she did once, keeping her eyes locked on Sloane. Politeness does not keep people alive, he thought, wishing he could tell Sage that trust would never survive an interrogation, but she was still right. That courtesy could blind them, yet neither argument helped the collapsed woman. So he moved. June did not use magic this time, calling for warm water, dry cloths, and room to breathe. The woman woke up coughing because basic care saved her before panic demanded a miracle, a tiny victory. June resting had not stopped their mercy. Instead, it forced others to step up. Then Piper returned from the wall with even worse news, warning that more people were coming along the Brindle River Road, with riders following close behind. Damon's blockade had turned their choices into a funnel, while Malcolm's summons turned their protection into complete heresy. Now, a sealed message sat hidden in Sloane's sleeve. And the woman he signed a charter to free refused to meet his eyes. He stood in the south yard with starving refugees inside his gate, while angry townspeople Counted every single scoop of grain. June rested because the charter still held Piper. Watched the blocked roads while Sage kept her eyes on Sloane, who held it. Secret she refused to share. Opening the gate had been the right thing. But honestly, it only gave every enemy another way to pressure them. Sickness. Arrived with the refugees, making Malcolm's warnings look entirely too calculated. Prepared rather than prophetic, the next wave reached them from Brindle River Road. Right at noon, 2 refugees collapsed before the guards could even search them. Child coughed so violently his mother had to stop him biting his tongue. More. Refugees pressed behind them until Gideon's spears forced a defensive line. But June was already up. She heard their pain, ignoring the personal cost. Sloane moved with her, one hand near her knife, her other arm. Stiffly wrapped, the sealed silver sanctum paper remained hidden deep inside her sleeve. Kept pressed against her side, Sage noticed. Meanwhile, Gideon ordered the gate narrowed. The sick went to the south yard, while everyone else waited outside. They hated the narrowed gate. Hearthmere, on the other hand, hated the sick. Entering at all, shouting that the road fever would spread through the town. Others blamed the witches. People who once watched June save lives now stared at her hands, terrified that healing itself could carry the plague. Then, a silver-robed priest marched up, shoving a notice onto the gate post. He needed no introduction, his pale waxen sanctum robe announcing his absolute authority. The notice claimed that witch contamination had followed their precious Hearthmere charter, declaring that sheltering Sloane Vale and June Alder brought the plague upon them. The decree had arrived far too quickly to be any honest response. The sick child convulsed again, his mother's scream cut through the air, sharper than any speech he could make. June looked at him, her face pale from the last healing session. It is your choice, he muttered, and June knelt as silence fell. With hope and desperate expectation, June's magic light moved under the child's skin, his coughing slowed, and his fingers slowly released his mother's sleeve. The mother sobbed into her hands. For 1 second, the gate notice looked completely fake, but then 3 more sick refugees suddenly surged toward June. Sloane stepped between them before Gideon could move. There was no flame or threat. Just her physical shield blocking them. She uttered only a single word back. A refugee with a bloody scarf pointed angrily at the paper. She caused this, let the healer fix it. His words exposed the entire trap. Blame the witches, then use them until they collapse. Everett quickly climbed onto a grain crate near the water barrels so the crowd could see him. June heals 2 more people, then she rests until she says otherwise, Everett announced. Anyone grabbing her leaves this shelter line. Anyone who believes that lying notice can explain why Malcolm's paper arrived before the second sick cart was even unloaded. The priest lifted his chin arrogantly. High Prior Malcolm Creed speaks for the sanctum. The breathing of that sick child speaks louder. Everett replied. The refugees murmured and the priest glared at him. He had become used to that exact reaction from corrupt authorities. June healed an old man whose lips had turned completely gray, then a girl who could not stand without shaking. The yard grew increasingly quiet as June weakened. By the 3rd healing, sweat drenched her forehead despite the biting cold. When she reached for the next patient, her hand missed by an inch. Everett caught her wrist gently, telling her to stop. She tried to glare at him through blurry vision. There are more, she whispered. I know, Everett replied. They are scared, she insisted. He knew that too, but she finally sat on the crate Sloane pushed behind her. This was the true test of their charter. People were coughing. June could help, but Everett still had to defend her right to stop in front of everyone. A refugee woman shouted out, so we just watch them die. No, Everett answered, we use water. Warmth, clean bandages, and hands that are not collapsing. June is not the whole town's emergency resource. His words were simple, but the crowd's reactions were not. Some people looked ashamed, while others grew furious. Several glared at June, as if Everett were withholding their family's only hope. Their desperation was understandable, but it still did not give them ownership of her. Sloane took the first bucket. It was just a bucket, but Hearthmere had reached the point where a condemned fire which, touching water, became a total public crisis. She set it on the cold stones, held both hands low, and heated the water until steam rose in a thin white curl, not boiling, not showy, just warm enough for clothes, hands, and shaking children. A man near the gate muttered that this which fire and water was how the sickness spread. Sloane looked directly at him, then do not use it. He went bright red because his wife was already dipping a cloth into the bucket for their coughing daughter. When Sloane was angry, she never sugarcoated The point, she simply stated the choice and let the man face his own hypocrisy. More. Buckets followed and Sloane warmed them one by one. Piper carried urgent messages. Between the gate and the south yard, Gideon quickly placed guards between June and the crowd, then stopped people from tearing down the sanctum notice, leaving. It upkept the lie completely visible. Hiding it would only make people trust it. More, the panic did not vanish, but the refugees slowly started following instructions. They stopped desperately grabbing for June and instead asked where to place the sick. Hearthmere workers dragged blankets along the cold ground, grumbling under their breath. The guard who recently called witches trouble held his cup while Sloane poured water. The man offered no thanks, but he did not flinch either, a tiny sign of progress. Then a Hearthmere worker suddenly collapsed near the grain line. The yard snapped around. Refugee sickness could stem from dirty water, freezing cold, or simple hunger. Or the road Damon forced them onto. A collapse made things worse. The warning felt real, even without proof. The priest pointed at Sloane's buckets. Yelling about spreading contamination, Sloane gripped her bucket handle tightly. A spark of fire crawled along the rim before she quickly snuffed it out. She stopped the fire herself. Gideon saw her pain and stepped in to demand quiet. His voice cut like drawn steel as he shouted that the fallen man was carrying sick children only 10 minutes ago, instantly silencing the angry crowd. They trusted his caution. When June tried to rise, the leader blocked her. She stood firm, the worker's wife screamed in terror, and the leader permitted it. That fear deserved space. Sloane quietly offered a warmed cloth while Piper brought water. The guard helped the fallen worker sit upright. The man coughed and spat into mud. He breathed easily again, completely bypassing June's exhausting, magical healing. The leader held up the cloth for the entire yard to witness. Not everyone needs magical aid. Basic warmth prevents panic from taking over. This stops them from proving an absent tyrant right. The priest's face twisted with pure fury. He accused them of mocking the high prior. The leader stood her ground. She mocked him for sending warning notices far quicker than actual help. The sharp reply weakened his holy authority. Sage stepped from the gate's shadow. Gideon did not draw his sword this time, showing real, undeniable progress. Sage quietly whispered that another secret letter had been delivered. Keeping her eyes on the crowd, the leader asked where it was. Sage pointed to the south wall, where a messenger slipped the priest a note. It contained road timings. The chilling realization immediately struck the leader. When asked if she could grab it, Sage offered a humorless smile. She promised to steal it, warning that returning politely might be too difficult. The leader quietly teased her not to ruin her scary prince act. Then she vanished. The leader deeply distrusted the concept of shadow walking. You better believe this whole sickness panic was no random accident. The priest waited for a packed yard and a completely exhausted healer. He struck while Sloane used her magic. The panic was perfectly timed. 30 agonizing minutes dragged slowly by. June sat cradling her cup. Desperate people begged for healing, while Sloane silently warmed water. Piper ran frantically back and forth as thick dust billowed along the road. Gideon kept the crowd steady with clear orders until the priest shouted. Branding her a thief, he pointed as Sage burst from the passage. Her cloak was badly torn, but she held the stolen paper tightly. 2 silver-robed men chased her down, one brandishing a sharp, deadly blade. Publicly attacking her instantly shattered their righteous, holy argument completely. Sage ducked behind a barrel, kicking a wooden bucket to trip them. She hurled the folded paper, and the leader barely caught the damp, torn strip. The note was written in a tight hand, but the priest lunged. Panic's third bell, witches. It was not enough to prove everything. But it proved the plague followed a set schedule. The yard watched. They saw him read it. The priest snapped that it was stolen. Stolen from the instigators, the commander countered. That did not help his case. Sage was breathing heavily, a line of blood dripping down her shoulder. Moving forward, she became the priest's new target. See how they gather, he cried, claiming witches only protect their own. Sloane stopped. The commander wanted to defend her, but held his tongue. She simply grabbed a warm bucket and walked right past the priest. The bucket went to the woman who had previously insulted the commander. Your husband needs this, Sloane said. The woman accepted it with shaking hands. Her soft thank you was a small gesture that shattered the priest's momentum. Suddenly, Piper charged down the steps so fast her boots skipped the bottom. She was wind-burned and furious. Damon is marching, she warned. The yard froze instantly. Gideon asked how close. Close enough to spot our smoke before sunset. Hyper swallowed, explaining that the riders carried banners bearing Damon's colors. Soldiers and supply carts followed a herald claiming Prince Damon was coming. He was coming to save them from witch rule. An eerie silence fell. The plague, the refugees, and now the savior banners. Too convenient. And just like that, you can see how all the puzzle pieces clicked together. The priest smirked, welcoming this supposed mercy. Gideon stepped forward. He blocked the priest, growling that true mercy does not march with an army. His words instantly shifted the yard. Guards turned to the road, while workers moved refugees deeper south. Sickness still spread, food was tight, and June was completely exhausted. Sage was exposed, and Sloane still carried that mysterious, hidden document. But at least they managed to stabilize the panic before Damon arrived. The commander looked at Gideon, ordering him to bar the gates immediately. Defenders moved the vulnerable behind the second wall. Gideon warned of treason, but the commander stared down the dusty road. Rising dust clouds in the distance signaled the approaching rescue army. He declared his brother could explain this suspicious timing from outside. They had barely stopped the artificial plague panic from tearing them apart. June's boundary held, and Sloane survived the initial accusations. Meanwhile, Sage secured their first actual proof of scheduling against the conspirators. But the enemy now knew their faces, and Damon was marching. He marched directly toward them under fake banners. Talk about bad timing. Left with no choice, the commander ordered Hearthmere to prepare for siege. Later, he found the hidden pardon letter inside Sloane's dripping wet coat. Suddenly, everything made total sense. They had moved June safely into the keep. Sage sat quietly at the table, while her shoulder wound was carefully bandaged. As the commander moved Sloane's coat away from the hearth, something slipped. The pale, wax-sealed letter slid from an inner pocket, landing face up. Sloane saw it first. Nobody moved, wind rattled the shutters, the seal lay broken, and the written offer was blunt. The Silver Sanctum would pardon Sloane Vale and withdraw her death mark. They promised her safe passage to Dawnshield Keep if she testified that Everett had forced. Her fire corrupted Hearthmere with his charter and sheltered witches for rebellion. Her confession had to arrive before Damon entered under rescue. Authority, it was safety in exchange for making him the reason she needed rescue. Everett felt a surge of anger first, simply because he was human and still capable of stupidity. Shame followed quickly. The letter turned Sloane's survival into a transaction, exactly what he had promised never to do. Everett asked if she would take it. Talk about a tense moment, dead silence. June sat near the hearth, holding her cup tightly. Sage watched silently from the table. With her bandage half-tied, Gideon stood by the door, ready for an enemy he could hit. Silas kept his hands over his records, looking deeply unprepared for the personal cost of treason. Sloane crossed the room and held out her hand. She demanded it back, and he handed it over. This did not make him noble, but it made an honest answer possible. Sloane looked down at the letter, answering yes, her plain answer hurt more than any denial. How long? Everett asked. Her reply was long enough to hate herself for reading it twice. Everett had expected denial, anger, or one of her sharp replies. The truth hurt more because he could not dismiss it as simple self-defense. Sloane folded the letter once. Her hands were steady, though her voice was not. They knew what to offer, she said. No stake, no chains, no one begging for fire, no one calling her spare heat with a polite face, just a road out before his brother arrived and turned her into the reason he saved everyone. He wanted to promise he would never let that happen, but stopped himself. A promise made under pressure would not erase the tempting offer in her hand. The price was him, Everett said. Sloane replied that the price was saying he owned what everyone already believed he owned. That was the ugliest part, and she was not entirely wrong. The prince had defended her choice and written it into the charter. Still, anyone looking from the outside saw Sloane beside a prince, using fire when the town needed it, sleeping under his protection. The sanctum did not even to invent ownership. It only had to misname what people already saw. Say, tied off her bandage with her teeth, warning that the letter was bait. Sloane did not look at her. She knew. Sage questioned her. Sloane's head snapped up. Fire flickered at her fingertips, small and furious. Careful, Sage warned, remaining unflinching. Everett stepped quickly between them before a wounded scout and an exhausted fire, which turned his war room into a petty personality contest. With casualties, he demanded silence, asking Sage what she found. Sage reached into her torn cloak and pulled out the folded strip from the sickness panic. Then she took out a second scrap, smaller, wrapped in dark thread. she had stolen one message and taken half of another before the priest's companion noticed. They used the same. Courier marked Sila's whined about for days. Sila's weakly muttered he was only verifying. Not whining, Sage retorted that he did it with the eyes of a haunted clerk. Under other circumstances, Everett would have enjoyed that insult. Right now, he wanted the evidence more. Sila spread the scraps beside Damon's. Blockade rope, the heresy summons, and the earlier courier fragments. His. Silas's fingers move fast. He avoids explaining every single mark because Everett would throw himself into the fire. Silas only points where it matters, same root chain. Silas explains, same seal pressure on the fold, same courier spacing. This sickness notice was timed exactly to the rescue banners. Gideon's jaw tightens. Damon. In Malcolm, Silas looks at Everett before answering, linked enough for witness. Copies but not enough to name every private order, enough to prove the panic. An arrival are coordinated, that's all the papers safely prove, and the limit. Matters they don't know every private order, they only have the pardon letter. The timed sickness strip, the blockade proof, the charter summons and sages. Wound from stealing evidence the silver sanctum wants back, still this evidence doesn't ease the tension, it only makes the danger more specific. Sloane stares. At the letter, they wanted me to say, Everett forced me before Damon came in to rescue everyone from him. Yes, Sage says as Sloane's mouth twists, and if I refuse, nobody answers right away. Everett does because she deserves the plain truth, then you stay visible, and they need another way to make you. The problem, June's cup clicks softly against the table. That is not comfort. No, Everett replies, comfort would be lying. Sloane looks at him and he stops hiding behind jokes. You should be angry, she says, I am some. She takes that in without blinking. Everett hates saying it, but he hates pretending otherwise even more. It would make things fake, and fake Mercy had nearly burned her once already. I am angry that you hid it, Everett admits. I am angry that part of me saw the letter and immediately wondered if I'd been stupid to trust you. I am angrier that the thought wore my brother's voice. Sloane's fingers tighten around the paper. Everett keeps going because the worst part still needs saying. I am scared. Because I need your fire in the battle. Needing you makes me sound exactly like every man you should run from. Nobody answers. Sloane's expression changes. She doesn't soften, but she stops hiding the hurt. I waited for that sentence. Which one? The one where you finally admit the charter doesn't make needing me harmless. The answer is painful and earned. Everett looks at June, exhausted beside the hearth, Sage bleeding through her bandage, and Gideon preparing to hold the gate against royal soldiers, while Silas already sorts scraps for copies. Despite his fear, then Everett looks back at Sloane. It doesn't make needing you harmless. The charter makes you public and enforceable. She laughs. Once low and without joy, and if I tell you no now, then I defend the gate. Without your fire, Gideon makes a strangled sound. Everett ignores him, but Sloane does not. Your captain disagrees. My captain wants to survive, Gideon says, his voice rough but steady. So do I, but that does not give me the right to order your hands into the flame line. Sloane looks at him for a long second. You've changed, Gideon grunts. Do not make it sentimental. The room finally breathes again as Silas interrupts for a useful reason. If we intend to make this public proof, I need copies before Damon reaches the inner gate. How many? Everett asks. Enough that losing one doesn't erase the truth. That's a horrible day indeed, the prince thinks, handing Silas the ancient time strip. Sloane stares at her pardon letter for a beat, then places it on the table. Placing that paper on the table is her silent answer. Silas hesitates, waiting until her fingers completely clear the paper. The prince notices this brutal siege has taught them all something. Suddenly, Piper bursts through the door before Silas can even finish the first copy. Her hair is wildly tangled, and her grin is completely gone. Her look makes everyone instantly freeze. Damon's front riders reach the bend, she warns. They are demanding the gates open for the royal rescue, shouting their orders. They claim the sick will go to Dawnshield Keep. Contained, Sloane's face goes entirely still. Talk about a suffocating trap. They are already preparing the crowd to accept those chains. The prince looks to Gideon. Closing the gates makes them look guilty. Opening everything simply hands Damon the town, and they cannot afford that. Damon loves trapping enemies where he always wins. The prince hesitates. Then they open just one thing. Silas winces, warning his prince against it. He suggests the outer square, keeping the inner yards safe. Keep the refugees and sick behind Gideon's lines, where witnesses can see. Copied papers ready. Damon can negotiate, not conquer. Gideon nods. What about Sloane? Sage asks. Everyone stares, but Sage refuses to apologize. The letter is the real focus. Damon expects her to be hiding, cornered, or already gone. Sloane looks at him. The room waits for the prince to decide her fate. He hates treating her like a piece on a board, stepping away. He tells her she still has choices before Damon reaches the gates. She can escape through the east gate with 0 debts owed. Gideon can spare a few guards to help, or she can hide inside with June. She does not have to face the crowd. Another option remains. Stand in the square and let Damon see she refused his pardon. What if she walks? Her question tightens his chest. He would hate it but defend her choice. Nobody moves. It is the clearest choice. Every path carries a heavy cost. Sieges never allow easy answers. Pay the painful price, but do not let them own your soul. Sloane looks at the pardon, weighed down by choices. June can barely sit up, but her eyes are still ready to fight. She looks at Sage, who bled for this proof, and at Gideon, the soldier. He stands by the door, bracing himself. Finally, she looks at the prince. When she signed his charter, she thought it was just worthless paper. It was only paper when he wrote it, but it became real because of their fear. People obeyed it even when they were terrified. His throat goes dry. He does not make a joke. Sloane picks up the letter again. She hands it to Silas, telling him to copy it and read it aloud. Silas takes the heavy paper, promising to do exactly as she asks. Sloane turns to him, stating she is not standing there because he needs her wild fire. Say it anyway, the prince urges her. He understands her reasons now. He understands she is doing this for every frightened witness in the room. You are not staying because we need your magic, the prince says. You stay by choice. Sloane nods, standing tall right beside him. Her brave choice gives him his answer, but also invites terrifying danger. She's going to stand with them in full view of their enemies. Gideon stands tall, declaring that the guard loyal to the charter. He opens the heavy doors, summoning his guards strictly by their official titles. Form the outer line. No one touches Sloane, and no one takes June. No one enters the inner yard without direct orders from the prince. The command echoes, boots clash against stone, doors swing wide open. Hearthmere prepares for the brutal clash they just invited. Silas quickly packs the copied evidence into 3 secure oilcloth wraps. Sage takes hers with her uninjured hand, offering a silent nod of approval. If Gideon lies, she whispers quietly, let him do it loudly. That is the exact plan, he replies. Her response is sharp. Then Gideon must suffer, he jokes. It is a brief moment of levity. But reality waits outside as they march toward the outer square together. Piper rushes to the walls, while Gideon forms the defensive line. June remains inside, frustrated by her injuries but safe under the law. Sloane walks proudly at the prince's side, refusing to hide behind anyone. She holds no weapons or magic in her hands, yet she looks completely unstoppable. At the gates, the rescue banners finally rise. The crowd gasps. They spot Sloane before Damon does, and whispers spread instantly. Guards tighten the circle, creating a wide protective space around her. The town that once wanted her burned now watches her in awe. She stands openly with the evidence that could doom everyone else. Instead of victory, the prince feels only deep dread for her safety. Damon's smug expression instantly vanishes when he spots Sloane alive. Her presence completely shatters his scheme. Talk about a major twist. He expected a hiding, guilt-ridden witch, but she stands proudly before him. She is here by choice, and her voice will completely destroy him. But this bold move also makes her the prime target in Hearthmere. Damon rides under white banners as foul beasts howl nearby. The prince stands firm in the town square with Sloane beside him. Gideon holds the guard line, while Silas protects the crucial evidence. The crowd gathers in silence. His brother rides through the smoke. Seeing her alive ruins Damon's fake hero smile for a split second. He quickly recovers his smug grin, calling out across the square. Stand down, brother, he calls. Your royal savior has finally arrived. Refugees scream as a massive roar shakes the mountain range. The prince looks right past his brother's horse. Soldiers form a brutal shield wall, blocking the desperate crowd. Panicked families beg for mercy, while wealthy nobles hide safely behind them. Helpless, exhausted people can only watch in dread. The monsters close in. The prince warns their rescue faces the wrong way. Damon keeps smiling, but his eyes shift from Sloane to the workers. Workers then to Silas's oilcloth packet, confirming the prince's dark suspicions. He had expected panic, sickness, a hidden witch, and a desperate prince. Too broken to resist. Instead, Damon faces a crowd as he demands command of Hearthmere by royal authority, ordering the sick to be transferred to Donshield Keep, the witch threat contained, and any resistance treated as treason. The prince mocks that Damon clearly practiced that speech. It shows. A few onlookers almost laugh, but nobody relaxes. Another roar echoes down the ridge as dark shapes move through the pines. The first blight beast bursts onto the slope behind Damon's line. Damon raises his gloved hand, ordering his soldiers to guard the carts. They obey instantly, but his next move, absolute betrayal, the shields close. It folds inward to protect Damon's riders, sealed carts, and wealthy passengers. A desperate woman shoves her child toward the shields, but a soldier shoves them both back. The crowd and the refugees inside the gates see everything. Silas sees it, reaching for his pen as the prince demands witnesses. Already listening, Silas replies. The first beast smashes into Damon's outer shields. A horse screams. Damon's formation tightens, leaving the road people exposed. Gideon looks to the prince. Opening the side gate now invites the beasts inside. But keeping it closed means leaving Damon to decide who deserves to live. Gideon hates that brutal choice, turning quickly to his guard line. He orders the side gate open, the second line holding for refugees. Piper is already moving along the wall, striking the emergency gate bell. She rings the secret code, then leaps off the parapet and runs. She commands the wind so fiercely her cloak snaps straight as the gate bar is lifted. Cold air and pure terror rush in as refugees stumble forward. Damon yells to close the gate, but the prince shouts back. Hearthmere keeps its own gate, an easy order to give but dangerous to survive. A second blight beast charges close behind as refugees rush toward the gate. Gideon's guards force lanes through the panic, while workers drag heavy carts across the street, and Sloane steps to the heat channel, pale but steady. The prince moves beside her, speaking quietly so it does not sound like an order, asking if she can give one line. Sloane looks at the crowd, then at Damon, declaring she does this for them. For them, the prince agrees. Blue fire erupts from her palm, flooding the stone channel, blazing low across the gate mouth to force the first beast back. The beast skids sideways as the refugees surge through the hot opening. With heat at their backs, Hearthmere's guards urgently shout them forward. A little girl in a fine cloak falls near Damon's lines as a wheel shatters. The prince sees her fall, but Damon looks away to follow his moving cart. June spots her, too. She had been resting safely behind the second line. She stands so fast her cup crashes against the hard stone floor. The prince grabs her arm before she can run. It is only one child, she whispers. Her face is gray with fear, but the choice is still hers to make. She let go. June crossed the open gap with two guards nearby while Sloane's blue flame held the beast back. A claw struck the cart beside the girl, spraying broken wood. June shielded the child, pressing a shaking hand to the deep cut in her side, using just enough healing magic to slow the bleeding. June collapsed. Gideon rushed in before the beast could strike. He hauled June and the child behind a cart barrier, while militia guards drove their spears into the beast's shoulder. The creature thrashed, catching a spear in its massive teeth, and dragged a guard off his feet. Sloane's flame surged, and for a single moment it seemed Sloane would spend all her magic. Instead, she narrowed the line and drove a precise strip of fire across the beast's front legs. It stumbled into the cart funnel as Gideon rammed his heavy spear under its jaw. The militia struck with him. Down it went, but another beast instantly charged through the smoke right behind it. Piper dropped from the wall, shouting about a third shape. Everett dryly replied he only heard of two. This light joke gave the frightened people a brief moment of relief. Piper grabbed a fallen banner pole, planting it in the mud to signal the side gate line to head toward the inner yard. Refugees fled, workers pulled carts, and the guards began acting as a single unit. Damon's soldiers just stood there, shields locked around the carts. The crowd noticed that cowardice too. The second beast hit their front line and recoiled. Sloane staggered. Everett reached for her, caught himself, and held out his arm. Instead of grabbing, she took it for balance without looking at him. Still. Your choice, he said. Terrible time to be honorable, she muttered through her teeth. His whole reign has scheduling problems, he replied. Sloane gave a strained laugh, then sent one last strip of blue fire along the stone ground. The beast lunged away from the heat and into Gideon's line. Workers joined the guards and the rescued mill worker struck its side with a pick, while a refugee hooked its back leg with Heavy rope, untrained and furious, they fought together. Down it went. The beast went down under spear points, ropes, and rising steam. Damon had spent all week directing the town's anger at Everett and the witches, but Hearthmere used that anger on the monster instead. The third dark shape on the ridge stopped at the edge of the heat shimmer, paced once, and slowly withdrew into the smoke. Not gone forever, no such luck, but the main wave finally broke and the side gate held. Refugees were safe inside the second line. June was alive, slumped weakly against a guard's shoulder with the child breathing peacefully beside her. Sloane stood on her own feet barely, because pride and spite were doing most of the work. The square did not cheer. Everyone looked at Damon's formation, behind his solid shield. Damon's white banners, carts, and noble riders were still pristine, while the refugees he claimed to save were alive only because Hearthmere opened the side gate. After his cowardly soldiers closed ranks around Comfort, Silas raised his pen. Witnesses to the road line who saw the shields turn inward, Silas asked. I saw, said the mother, holding the child June had just saved. I saw, shouted 3 refugees at once. Damon rode forward, but the crowd did not part for him enough. Damon snapped. The witch's fire drew the beasts to civilians. She is unstable. See Sloane Vale under royal rescue. Authority. His soldiers moved, but Gideon stepped in front of Sloane before Everett gave the word. The command was given. Half the guard moved, while the others surrounded June. They stood by the refugees. This meant they were shielding a vital witness. They also guarded the exhausted healer, whom Prince Damon had nearly abandoned. He stepped between Damon and Sloane, asking if he dared seize her. She held the line while royal soldiers only guarded supply carts. Damon's face hardened as he demanded they move. The traveler refused. A refugee woman held up the child June saved, letting Damon see. Blood stained the girl's small cloak as they shouted he left them. A mill worker pointed his pick, accusing the guards of shoving people. Another cried out that Sloane held the line while Hearthmere opened gates. Accusations rained down from the furious crowd. Damon wanted an audience. He got exactly what he wanted, the perfect crowd to witness his downfall. The royal soldiers stopped advancing. You could feel the sheer panic rising. Men can ignore a single angry royal. They cannot ignore an entire city. An entire square just watched them abandon innocent children to the beasts. Damon struggled to recover, staring at the fallen beasts. He glared at the refugees, then shot the traveler a venomous look. You have absolutely no idea what you are provoking, he hissed. The traveler countered that he knew exactly what everyone had just witnessed. They were not safe. Damon had troops and the winter surge approached. Meanwhile, High Prior Malcolm Creed still controlled the Silver Sanctum. But Damon's heroic reputation was shattered. The crowd saw his true greed. The smoke parted behind the royal line, revealing a new threat. High Prior Malcolm Creed stepped out, wearing spotless silver robes. A priest and robed men followed, while Damon glared at Malcolm. Silas, Sage, and Sloane immediately noticed the tense familiarity between them. The priest did not pretend to rescue anyone. His eyes scanned the plaza. He noted the fallen beasts, the restless crowd, and the stalled soldiers. He saw Sloane alive beside the traveler and raised his order. His voice boomed over the square, declaring emergency sanctum authority. Hearthmere's witch threat would now be handled strictly by relic law. Sloane's fingers sparked with blue fire, and the guards instantly reacted. Damon lost his leverage, but Malcolm is about to force their hands. He walked through the smoke, holding a dark relic under cloth. The artifact's presence made Sloane's blue flames die instantly. It was a heavy nullstone collar, cold and shaped for a throat. The traveler recognized the cursed stone from the scars on Sloane's wrists. Malcolm raised the dark collar high for the entire square to see. He declared relic law active. Not a single person cheered. They had all witnessed Sloane defend the gate while the prince fled. Malcolm held immense power, status, and the relic to silence her magic. But he no longer commanded a crowd blind to his lies. That made him twice as lethal. He ordered Sloane to step forward. Sloane's hand slowly opened. A tiny thread of blue fire rose. It flickered quietly, refusing to fade even as the collar approached. Her flame died before she could even shape it. The square saw that too. Pale-robed men flanked Malcolm. Gideon bolted, Damon's soldiers crossed shields to block them, and Damon ordered everyone to stand down under sanctum jurisdiction. Damon tried to distance himself from the coercion his soldiers were helping enforce. Watch this, he lunged, but Malcolm's men moved faster. Because Sloane was exhausted, her flame already choked out by the collar. One guard seized her arm, while the other snapped the cold nullstone around her throat. The lock clicked and Sloane dropped to one knee. In that exact second, he saw only Sloane. In the collar, he had heard crowds scream, beasts roar, soldiers clash, and priests lie, but that quiet click was worse, dragging her straight back to the execution. Platform in front of the same town she had saved. He reached the first pale-robed man before he even thought. Gideon grabbed his shoulder. Behind, holding him back and warning him that swinging first would give Malcolm his riot. First, he absolutely hated Gideon for being right in that moment, but hated himself even more for needing that reminder while Sloane was on her knees with nullstone against her throat. Sloane lifted her head, her voice rough as she told him not to give him that. Her orders stopped him when Gideon's grip could not. Malcolm smiled. Malcolm sneered that the witch understood obedience under relic law. Sloane glared at him with open hatred and no fire in her hands, saying she understood. Men who needed collars because truth kept escaping. The crowd reacted before Malcolm could hide it. A few refugees hissed under their breath. Worker near the front laughed once, sharp and short. The sound failed to free her, but it showed him the collar had not made her small. Sage moved. He caught only half of it. 1 second, she stood near Sila's with her wounded shoulder stiff under its bandage. The next, she was inside the smoke shadow beside Malcolm's sleeve, reaching for the small key at his belt. She almost had it. She missed by half a breath. Her injured arm slowed her by half a breath. Pale-robed guard slammed a lantern low, cutting the shadow under Malcolm's cloak, and another caught Sage by the hair and shoulder. Sage twisted, kicked his knee, and still lost the key. It hit the stones at Malcolm's feet. Malcolm stepped on it, sneering that shadow filth always returns to its hiding place. He glared at Damon. Was this his rescue? Damon's soldiers had blocked Gideon, but Damon desperately tried to distance himself from the terrible outcome. Damon argued he only came to preserve Hearthmere under sanctum authority. How convenient, he spat, abandoning children while collaring helpless women under someone else's. The crowd heard it, and Damon noticed their reaction. Good. June tried rising from the second line. She made one step, then her legs failed. The frightened child June had saved desperately grabbed her sleeve and cried out. June pushed against the ground, but her arms could not lift her. Healing had a real cost, and the charter meant she did not have to pay until she broke. He ordered June to stay back, and she glared with wet eyes, insisting she could still try. You cannot heal a collar. Sloane cut in before he could answer. She swallowed hard against the nullstone, declaring she would not let them drain her too. The square fell silent. Malcolm wanted, which is to look selfish and dangerous, but Sloane protected June's boundary anyway. Kneeling in a collar, Sloane made Malcolm look weak, so he raised the stakes. Everett Mercer, Malcolm called out. Confess before these witnesses that you claimed this witch commanded her fire, corrupted this town through an unlawful charter, and armed heresy against the crown and the sanctum. Surrender the Hearthmere charter and the stolen records, and I will grant her a clean burning when judgment is complete. The square went cold. Clean burning, that was Malcolm's holy language for murder. Damon looked away first. Everett denied it, asking what would happen if he refused. Malcolm's smile thinned. Then the town watches what happens when a prince loves a weapon more than his people. The trap was set. Confessing meant calling Sloane property. If he attacked, Malcolm got his riot. Do nothing, and Sloane stayed. Talk about an impossible choice. Collared beside the old stake, Everett forced himself to study the objects, not just the collar. The silver cloth around Malcolm's relic case had a dark oil stain. Pale wax marked the latch, and dark thread clung to the keyring. The same materials appeared in their earlier evidence. It did not prove everything, but it connected the relic case to the stage notices and courier chain. Malcolm had not arrived with faith, he had arrived with props. Silas saw Everett notice it. His eyes dropped to the case, then to the oilcloth packets under his arm. He understood faster than his terrified posture deserved. Piper stood near the wall stairs, winded, dirt on her cheek, one hand half hidden in her cloak. The third witness packet was gone from Silas's bundle. Good. Everett met her eyes for 1 second. She lifted 2 fingers, small enough that Malcolm would think it was panic if he noticed it all. Then she slipped behind the guard line and up toward the wall. Everett did not assume Piper would succeed. He only kept Malcolm looking at him. You want me to confess possession? Everett asked. I want the truth, Malcolm said. No. Everett said, you want the one lie that makes every other lie easier. Malcolm's expression hardened. Sloane found Everett's gaze from the stones. The Collar had drained the color from her face. She swallowed against the dark. Bandon did not beg. Her control made the sight harder to bear. The politically safe move was delay, ask for terms, demand another witness, and pretend to negotiate while Sloane remained on her knees. Everett refused to do that. He stepped toward Sloane. Damon snapped Everett's name, but he ignored him. Malcolm lifted one hand, and the pale-robed guard tightened his grip on Sage's injured shoulder. Sage hissed through her teeth but did not cry out. One more step, Malcolm warned, and the shadow joins the fire witch in judgment. Everett stopped, not because he accepted it, but because Sage was his to protect. Under the charter, and he would not trade her pain for a dramatic stride. Real responsibility meant his anger could not spend Sage's body for a dramatic gesture. He turned slightly toward Gideon without taking his eyes off Malcolm. Captain, here, Gideon said. No one attacks unless I order it. No one lets the collar leave the square. Malcolm smiled, mocking how he gave orders like a man with power, and you need a collar to talk to one woman, Everett said. The crowd shifted again. Malcolm heard it. He could still hurt them. He could still kill Sloane if they moved wrong, but the square was no. Them one wrong move and he would kill Sloane, but the square was no. He stopped giving Malcolm the easy fear his relic theater was built to collect. He pulled his dagger and struck the gate bell twice. To Malcolm, it was noise. To his people, it meant move witnesses before weapons. Silas flinched, gripping his packets, while Gideon moved 2 guards toward the side street. They kept their eyes locked on Malcolm as Piper vanished over the wall. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. He knew something had moved, but he did not know what. The signal worked, a small, dangerous success. Then he looked at Sloane. He made a choice where everyone could hear it, declaring he would never confess to owning her, nor would he ever surrender the ancient charter that says she can tell him no. He refused to call her a weapon. Their entire religion falls apart when a woman saves people without being owned. Sloane closed her eyes for a split second. Malcolm's face changed. Just barely, but enough. He had prepared for fear, politics, or rage. But Malcolm had not prepared for him to refuse the exact sentence that would save his title while dooming the woman beside him. Malcolm told him he chose judgment. He replied that he chose Sloane, Sage, June, and every single person Malcolm tried to terrify into thanking him for a cage. Those words carried a heavy, terrifying weight. He meant every word. Malcolm raised the sealed order to clear the platform. The ancient wooden execution platform still stood at the edge of the square. It was still stained by black smoke from the morning he had refused to burn Sloane. Workers recoiled as the pale-robed men moved toward it. Refugees pulled their children back. Damon took a few steps away from Malcolm, hoping for distance. He wanted to erase the fact that his soldiers blocked Gideon with massive shields. Sage was forced to her knees beside the relic case. June barely stood. Sloane was dragged upright by her collar. The brutal sight killed his playfulness. The gate bell immediately answered his signal with 2 distant, ringing strikes from the wall. Malcolm heard only noise. His people heard a call to bear witness. Then the last roar of the winter surge rolled down the Blackspire range. Malcolm dragged Sloane toward the platform where his second life had once begun. It started with a torch. Malcolm treated her collar as absolute proof of her helplessness. He completely underestimated everyone standing against him, treating them as irrelevant. He dragged Sloane back onto the old execution platform during the storm. The massive final roar from the Blackspire range rolled directly over the city of Hearthmere. The crowd pressed back in fear. Children cried behind the second line. Damon kept his horse near the road, close enough to claim the credit. He was also close enough to escape. Sage knelt painfully beside the ancient relic case. A guard gripped her wounded shoulder. June barely stood. Piper remained missing. She still had the witness packet. The situation was terrible, but completely public. Malcolm spent all week teaching Hearthmere to watch witches. Now he needed them to watch Malcolm. Sloane was shoved toward the stake. The heavy nullstone collar kept her fire completely dead, but she remained highly alert. She looked at the crowd, then at him. No begging, no panic. Her calm stare reminded him of every single public promise he had ever made to her. He climbed 1 step toward the platform. Malcolm lifted the relic key, demanding he confess ownership. Charter, and he would end this cleanly. Cleanly, Everett questioned. He kept using that word for burning people alive. It did not improve the act. Nearby, a worker by the well laughed. Malcolm's mouth tightened. Public ridicule made him much less careful. Everett ordered Silas to read the charter clause. Silas looked Absolutely terrified, but he stepped forward, clutching the oilcloth packet to his chest. The Hearthmere Charter recognized protected witch citizens as free persons. Under town witness, Silas called out, his shaking voice gradually growing steady. By the end, no surrender, seizure, or sentence could stand while direct witnesses to staged harm were present and unheard. The charter could not physically stop Malcolm, but it forced the conflict into public view. He had dragged Sloane into the square to demand submission from everyone, but the witnesses were ready. When they heard the truth together, Malcolm's smile began to thin, a heretic. Charter did not bind the silver sanctum, then it should not scare you. When those witnesses speak, Everett shot back. Suddenly, two sharp bell strikes rang out. Hyper leaped over the side street wall, hit the stones hard, and rolled up, holding the missing oilcloth packet high above her head. Behind her, refugees from the Brindle River line arrived, alongside workers and two of Damon's guards. Hyper was pale, filthy, and struggling for breath. The third packet is copied, she announced, confirming both the sideline and the river road had heard it. And she added that Damon's shields completely folded. Damon's face instantly twisted. Before he could mask his shock, the second witness, Rue, had worked. Before Malcolm could stop it, Malcolm barked to silence her, but Gideon moved. Before Damon's soldiers could, his guard line stepped directly between Piper and the pale-robed men, acting without once waiting for Damon's royal permission. The crowd saw rebellion firsthand. The town guard had chosen the charter over their prince. Sage capitalized on the distraction. Instantly, she dropped her entire weight against the guard holding her captive, ignoring the sudden pain in her shoulder, and drove her heel directly into Malcolm's relic case. The impact sent the wooden chest skidding across the platform, forcing a secret drawer to spring open. Its hidden contents spilled onto the planks, false tokens, wax strips, and implicating letters tied with the same dark thread Sage had intercepted earlier. Pulled from the courier, no one moved. You could literally hear a pin drop. Everyone stared from the spilled evidence to the silver robes. They finally understood. These relics were the tools used to frame the innocent. Silas recovered his senses first. This man valued records far more than his own survival. Silas proudly held up the token from Sloane's first execution. Same witness. Mark, then he displayed the sickness notice. Same wax. Next, he pointed at the oilcloth, same stain as the framed livestock incident. Silas stopped there. He did not need to lecture. The crowd had eyes and fresh memories of Sloane saving lives. Staged, a rescued millworker yelled out. A refugee woman held up the child June saved. They called her evil. While she held the gate, another worker pointed at Damon for blocking roads. Voices erupted across the square. Malcolm had only wanted a single confession from Everett, but instead he got an entire town comparing evidence. Silas looked simultaneously offended by the chaos and incredibly proud. Prince Damon quickly turned his horse. Everett points toward the road. No banner leaves. Gideon keeps his eyes on the platform. Hold the south line. Refugees and workers block the road before Damon's soldiers can clear it. They do not attack, standing firm with picks and spear shafts refusing to move. Damon pulls his reins tight, calling Everett. His voice is low, meaning only the front lines hear the panic under his manners. Damon says this went too far. Everett snaps that he abandoned children outside his shield. He crossed that line long ago. Malcolm glances over from Damon, who is trapped on the road, watching the angry crowd turning against them, and finally drops his holy voice. You stupid people, he screams. Do you think fear keeps itself alive? Do you think border towns obey before they are shown? Terrifying waits in the dark. It is not a complete confession, but it is enough. Malcolm admits he deliberately maintains fear to control the border towns. He jabs the relic key directly into the collar's hanging chain and twists it. The null stone gives a low, cold pulse. The ritual tower behind the stake flares silver white. Out on the ridge, the dark shapes that were circling after the broken wave turn toward the square at once. Everett does not know how the relic works, and he does not need to. Malcolm turns the key, the tower flares, and the beasts charge toward the platform. Every witness sees the trap. The crowd breaks backward, but Sloane stays on her feet. That is what Everett remembers most. Sloane's hands are empty, yet the null stone locks her throat. She plants her boots on the planks, refusing to give Malcolm his desired panic. Run, Malcolm shouts to his men as Damon screams for his horse. The first beast clears the lower wall gap, hitting the outer square in a spray of mud. Gideon sends two guards forward, but the platform is the target. Malcolm collared Sloane right beside the active tower. To blame her for the attack he triggered, Everett reaches Sloane, putting both hands on her collar. The evidence lies scattered at Malcolm's feet. He holds the key and the lock stays at Sloane's throat. There is no safe solution. Gideon, break the lock, Everett demands. Gideon stares at the collar, fearing a slip. He must hold it still. Sloane looks at Everett's hands on the null stone, then at Gideon's blade. Her voice is thin but steady. Do it, she tells them. She trusts Everett's timing. In his past, people trusted him with unwanted work and easy blame. This is different. Sloane trusts Everett with her life. He holds the collar steady, pushing past his own fear to follow the plan. Gideon strikes hard with the back edge of his sword. The lock cracks but holds. Sloane's throat jerks under Everett's hands. Malcolm lunges wildly for the key chain, but Sage kicks his ankle hard enough to make him stumble. The second strike splits the lock, forcing the collar open. Its sharp, broken edge slices Everett's palm as he tears it away, freeing Sloane. Heat immediately rushes back into the crowded square. Sloane inhales sharply. Fire surges from her hands, so bright that every guard steps back in fear. Malcolm and his pale-robed men stand well within her reach. Damon remains trapped on the road. Sloane could easily burn the people who put her on that platform, but she chooses mercy. Instead, she turns her palm upward and unleashes fire straight into the ritual tower. The massive structure burns rapidly from the inside out. Silver strips snap, black ropes shrivel. The pull on the beasts finally breaks. It charged. The first beast slammed violently into Sloane's wall of heat instead of hitting the crowd. Gideon and his guards drove spears into its side as workers hooked heavy ropes around its legs, making it crash down and shake the entire platform. The second beast veered toward Sage. June moved, crawling because she could not stand. The child she saved clung to her sleeve as two refugees helped her reach Sage. June pressed a trembling hand to Sage's wounded shoulder, channeling just enough magic to stop the bleeding, then collapsed onto the cold stones. Alive and breathing, Sage looked at her, then at Everett, saying she had to stop. Everett agreed, urging her to help June back with her one working arm. Sage gave no speech, simply acting on the charter that protected them. Sloane's fire swept across the platform again, controlled and low, avoiding the crowd in the helpless, aiming instead at the burning tower, the beast, and the relic chain that Malcolm desperately tried to hide under his robe. The second beast caught flame across its shoulder and ran straight into the wall of Gideon's spears. The third beast on the ridge stopped as the tower collapsed, then vanished into smoke. The final wave ended because Sloane chose restraint when vengeance was easily within reach. Hearthmere had fought beside her. Malcolm did not save them, nor did Damon. Neither offered rescue. Instead, Malcolm stumbled backward from the burning tower, his robes badly scorched. The crowd parted for him now for the wrong reason entirely, not out of reverence but because of the evidence. Look at the fire, he screamed. Sloane lowered her hand. The ritual tower was ash. The crowd was alive, but the platform was ruined. I am looking, a rescued null worker called out. That single answer damaged Malcolm's claims more than anything Everett had said. Silas held up the juror scraps, shouting about witness tokens and stage notices. These are sealed scraps and relic bait, recorded before the square, Damon snapped. Those papers prove absolutely nothing, Damon snapped as Piper stood there, hands on her knees, raising one finger to tell him his guards heard his secret orders. The refugee woman with the child stepped forward, confirming that she heard it. One guard confirmed he saw the shields fold inward. The crowd did not even gasp. They already knew. Damon's lies had failed, and he looked at Everett. No longer protected by the status Everett's borrowed memories attached to him, the square stopped being impressed. Brother, Damon pleaded, suggesting they could settle this inside the keep. Absolutely not, Everett replied. You loved public authority when refugees were locked outside. Now you will face public consequences too. The answer was petty and correct, so Everett allowed himself both. He ordered Gideon to immediately disarm Damon's soldiers and seize the command carts for investigation. Next, he had Malcolm's relic case sealed under Silas's guard, then looked directly at Malcolm to give the command he had wanted to give since the start. Find him right now, Everett ordered. Same public square, but no torch. Gideon forced Malcolm to his knees exactly where Sloane had stood, tying his wrists tightly. Nobody cheered. The town was not here for a revenge execution. They were watching an accused tyrant face justice without a fire. Sloane stepped down from the platform. Everett offered his uninjured hand, which she stared at, then at his bleeding one, before taking his clean hand with clear irritation. She looked like someone who would later complain that he chose the least efficient rescue. Keep his fingers, still no owner, she asked. Never was, he said, her grip tightened once. Then do not call this your victory, she warned. He looked across the square. Sage held June upright, while Piper waved away help she clearly needed. Silas gripped the evidence, and Gideon blocked Damon with the calm of a man who had finally chosen which orders mattered. Everyone around them had seen a witch save Hearthmere twice. Our victory, he said. Sloane nodded. Better, she replied. That exchange mattered more to him than any coronation ever could. By dawn, the last blight beast near the road was dead or gone. The side gate still stood. Refugees slept inside Hearthmere instead of freezing outside. Damon's shield line. June was unconscious for half a day and irritable for the next 3, which meant she was recovering. Sage stayed close to the records. Piper repeated the story of her witness. Run with increasing personal glory. Malcolm did not burn. He had wanted fire. For Sloane, the prince gave him tied wrists, public witnesses, and stage tokens. Laid out for the town to inspect, that consequence fit his crimes better. Damon did not ride out under white banners. His soldiers were disarmed by the people they had tried to command. His carts were opened in public, and their food and blankets went first to the refugees he had abandoned. Can you blame him? He loved seeing that consequence hit. The royal seal from Crownmere arrived later after Silas, Piper, and 3 stubborn witnesses sent the evidence down the Brindle River route. King Caspian stripped Damon of the border claim and summoned the prince to answer for Hearthmere in person. The order did not save them. It only acknowledged late that Hearthmere had saved itself. The Hearthmere Charter stayed law, not perfectly. Fear did not vanish because Malcolm was tied up, and the prince finally acted like a ruler. Some people still crossed the street when Sloane passed. Others whispered when Sage appeared or June touched a wound. But the whispers now competed with public records, living refugees, burned relic tower, and proof that free witches had saved the square. Weeks later, they rebuilt the execution platform into an oath ground. They removed the stake and chains. A flat stone held the charter, and anyone accused could stand. Where the whole town heard the case, Sloane stood beside him when the first witch signed under the charter. She did not stand behind him. She did not hold fire for decoration. She stood with her arms folded, watching every witness like she was ready to remember their faces forever. You really did hire the witch they wanted dead, she said quietly. Best terrible staffing decision of his second life, he replied. She looked at him, and the corner of her mouth almost moved. Sloane still rationed smiles carefully. Partner, she said, not staff. That hit him harder than the crowd, the seal, or Damon's face when his carts opened. Partner, he said. He had woken in a useless prince's body with a crowd demanding he burn her. Months later, he stood in the same square, while Hearthmere swore by a law that said she belonged to no one. The town was alive. The witches were named. Damon was stripped, and Malcolm was exposed. Sloane was free beside him by choice. For the first time in either life, being useful did not feel like being used.